welcome to Beauties and Beasties, the independent pest podcast for the UK.
Hello. How are we doing?
Hello, young man. Yeah. You look like you are in a Doctor Who movie. Hey up, Clive.
Why would you say I look like I'm in a Doctor Who movie?
Because the back's all like blurry. Remember when the TARDIS moved? It looks a bit like that. It looks like you're sort of stuck between two alternate universes.
You're showing that you're an absolute. Oh, not echoing for me. If it's echoing for anyone else, then please say. Otherwise,
stay there because I might be able to fix that.
There we go. No, you're just showing that you're a nerd. You know what Doctor Who is. You've watched episodes. Go on. Who's your favourite Doctor then?
I tell you who I would love to be a Doctor. It would be Benedict Cumberbatch.
You reckon?
Yeah, he's one of my favourite actors. I think he's absolutely brilliant. Brilliant.
Did you hear that bit where he was trying to do some narration for some wildlife program, and he just could not, for the life of him, say the word penguin?
No, he's a funny dude, and do you know the one thing I wish they had done more and more episodes of was when he was Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, actually, I quite enjoyed that as well.
Yeah.
I don't know why I'm having a go at you for calling you a nerd. Let's be fair. Out of everyone going, I'm probably the biggest nerd here, king of the nerds. There we go. We've got loads of people already on this morning, which is great. Hello, everyone. How are we all doing? So yes, little bit of a catch up as to last week. How did it go?
I wasn't there, was I? I was away.
I meant your week been.
Oh, how's my week been? Can I tell you about it some other time?
Yeah, sure. We've all had one of those. I mean, it's coming towards the end of the year, isn't it? We've all got lots on. We're all trying to get stuff done. I know what's grumbling you, and hopefully we'll get
honestly, you don't. So that is
okay.
So just for people, we're trying to get a CPD scheme, blah blah blah. Alex thinks that's what's grumbling on. It's a major thing. It still pales in insignificance.
Okay.
Yeah,
well,
I'm done.
With that, last week, I mean, that sounds really cryptic and kind of terrifying. So let's swerve that one for a little bit. When we had the last week, you missed Jasmine, of course, from Photolec, and she was fantastic. We had a good chat about retrofitting bulbs, which anyone listening to this probably is going to be looking at having to upgrade or cross-adapt their EFKs over the next couple of years. It was a good bit of myth busting because actually we sit there and we think, oh, everyone's going to have to change their bulbs. We've got the Roche band coming in. But Jasmine was pretty good actually about saying that no, because their specialist bulbs are the bulbs we use for ILTs, that actually we don't need to worry about it as of yet. But because there are fewer, specialty bulbs being produced, because there's fewer larger bulbs being produced, we probably will see a price hike. So at some point, the cost of, specialty fluorescent tubes will close the gaps with retrofit LEDs, coupled with the fact that dedicated EFK units for LED bulbs will always remain relatively high. So it's an option for those who are looking to not do a soft sell, but certainly to do a fairly sort of low impact transfer across to this new technology, which is kind of cool. I mean, and especially if you think about how many bulbs you've got kicking about at the moment, it's fairly intense, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, but I can't lie. I've been looking forward to our next guest for a long time. I've followed his content for years. I didn't realize how long I followed it for, but it was probably one of the things that got me into YouTube. So we're going to bring him on. people will know him.
Say,
Joseph the Minkman Carter.
Hold on,
One.
oh, hang on.
Go
Sorry,
on, Al.
I'm going to say that I actually don't know a huge amount about Mr. Minkman Carter. So
Don't worry, I'll fill in the gaps.
You've got one nerd with you today and one aspiring nerd. So please, can you introduce yourself for everyone listening online?
Sure. My name's Joseph Carter. They call me the Minkman. And yeah, I'm glad to be here. Man, we had so many things, almost had to cancel so many different times. And then I ended up getting a little late because I forgot one thing I had to go run out and do and then come back. So anyway, sorry about all the hassle getting me on, but I'm here.
Oh, excited to have you on.
Yeah, fantastic.
And
Yeah.
Sean, so everyone listening to this behind the scenes at the moment, Sean has been like a kid in a candy store waiting for Christmas for not just the last couple of weeks, since we confirmed that you're going to be coming on at some point, and he has been absolutely sort of, yeah, like a big kid. So
there's two reasons for that. The first one is I've always wanted to ask questions that aren't covered on your channel, and your channels are extensive. If anyone hasn't watched it, the YouTube channel is phenomenal. But also my oldest boy, who's 8, I've taken him to work on that, and he's just never really shown any interest at all, like zero interest, to a point where I don't take him to work and that. He likes his football and blah, blah, blah. And I was talking about this, and he went, Minkman. And I went, yeah. And he went, I watch your stuff. Do you? And he went, yeah. And I was like, give over. And he started going through, he watches it more than me. He knew the name of your dogs. He knew the name of your mink. He knew everything. I was like, yes, there's hope for him to be a pest controller yet. Yeah. So, yeah, it went well. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. Stuart Blair made it happen. So thank you very much, Stu, but we'll get to that. So let me start this off, because there's one question I want to ask more than anything. I want to know what led up to the mink, because I've only ever seen from the mink onwards, like how, where, why, what was it before? How did you get there? What made you do it?
Okay, so I was always into animals as a kid, wild animals more specifically. Like I like all animals, but more specifically, I was into more of the wild type animals. First, let me just double check, because I know we didn't get to do our little preliminaries. Is volume everything good? Does everything sound good? Or okay. So we were supposed to do a setup just for everyone else to know before. And I was like, hey, I'm here. And then I was like, crap, I forgot something. I had to run out. I forgot a mink I had to put away. Anyway, so do apologize. These guys are running on the edge of their seats here. Okay, so always been an animal nut, like day one. Like I was, as soon as I could walk around, I was catching worms, and then it moved up to turtles, and then it moved up to hedgehogs, because I lived over in Europe. I was in Denmark for 2 years. We don't have hedgehogs here in the US, but over in Denmark, as you guys are fully aware of, just like you guys, they have the European hedgehogs. They call them pinsvin over there. So basically, as I matured, I just caught more and more complicated animals. Like I said, started out with worms and moved all the way up to where when I was a teenager, I became a falconer and trained birds of prey. Here in the United States, we don't purchase birds of prey, we capture them. So you actually go out, and I mean, you can purchase them too, but as a beginner falconer, you're in many states anyway, you're required to start with a wild caught bird. You can't purchase in some of that's been changing, but that's a general rule across the board for most places.
why?
Why?
What's the rationale behind it? Yeah.
Because it's a very different bird. If the bird starts out wild, he already knows how to hunt. And if you screw up and lose it, he just continues his life as if you never existed. If you go take a captive bred bird and you screw up and lose it, that bird, depending on at what point in the training you lost it at, might not be prepared to fend for itself. Whereas a wild caught bird, he's just like, man, that was an annoying little blip in my life. Let me continue forward like nothing else happened. But even an adult, let's say it's a red-tailed hawk. Say it's the same species, right? You start out with a red-tailed hawk that's been chamber raised. Man, he's fat. He has no muscle conditioning. He has no knowledge on how to survive other than his own instincts. And you screw up and lose him. Well, what's the chance of him surviving? Like almost none. A wild bird, the only risk is if there's some kind of equipment, he's dangling from him that's going to risk his life. Other than that, he's totally ready to just continue life as usual. So that's that's the reasoning behind it.
So we've had a couple of falconers on in the past, and I was just about to say, I wonder what they think of this. And Sarah, who was the first falconer we actually had on, has literally just chimed in to say that's a far better way in my eyes. Be interesting to hear what Layla has to think of that, because I think she would come at this from a very different approach, wouldn't she, Sean? Not to put words in her mouth, but from the meeting we had with her a couple of weeks back, she almost sort of like hand rears everything from chick, doesn't she, from a very early on age.
I don't.
Yeah, and that's for, at least in the U.S. I'm not as familiar with the culture and your guys' side of the world with falconry. Like I'm briefly aware, but on our side, it's very much recommended that you start out with a passage bird, or if you were going to purchase one, a chamber raised bird, rather than starting with an IS and imprinting it, because there's so many complications with imprinting and raising an IS that it's just, it's hard when you know what you're doing. I should say, rather than being hard, it's easy to screw it up when you know what you're doing. When you don't know what you're doing, it's just a freaking nightmare. So in our side of the world, at least, it's highly recommended that if you're going to start out with a bird, in your first several years, at least, definitely start out with either a chamber raised, or in our case, mostly going to be wild caught, what are called passage hawks. A passage hawk is a bird that's old enough to survive on its own. It has no attachment to its parents anymore. It's living on its own, been doing so for several months in most cases. And then you capture it, but he's still young enough that it hasn't like pair bonded and raised babies or anything like that. It's still in its juvenile plumage. So most people are recommended to start with a passage hawk. And if that's an exception, then they're going to be purchasing basically the same age bird, but it's been raised in a cage, been raised in a breeding facility. And those birds are far less complicated. Most people agree. I'm sure there's someone somewhere who disagrees, right? Because everyone has an opinion. But I would say the majority of falconers are going to agree it's easier, it's more simple to start. Or maybe let me take a step back. It's harder to screw up a bird like that because they're all hard. They all take work. They all take patience. But it's not as easy to screw up a bird that's already set in its ways to a certain degree. It's matured enough that it doesn't see you as mom. You don't have to worry about a lot of the complications that come in with, hey, I raised this from a young baby. Now he's trying to, attack me because he sees me as a threat, as a competitor, right? Or maybe he's not attacking you. He's attacking your wife or your kids or the neighbor, or things like that, or dogs. See, another complication that also comes with chamber raised birds too. Chamber raised birds, they lived in a bubble. They didn't live out in the wild being chased by predators, avoiding predation, grabbing something that's too big for them and being like, man, this is a rodeo. I'm not going to do that again. They didn't have any of those experiences. So if you have a more aggressive species and you go out with a chamber raised bird, it could attack your neighbor's dog. It could attack your neighbor. It could attack, maybe not the neighbor if it's chamber raised, but it can attack totally inappropriate animals and get itself killed or injure something. Whereas if you had a wild caught bird, he already knows dogs are off limits. That little Chihuahua, he looks yummy, but he bites. I'm going to leave that thing alone. He's not really prey. That little cat running across the fence, that sucker's not prey unless I'm really hungry. Then I might take it. They already have that experience. And so some goofy, inexperienced falconer that's hunting in a totally inappropriate place where someone's walking their dog, if he has a wild caught bird, the chance of him hitting that dog is very slim. If he has a chamber raised bird, so it's you've removed the complication of raising a baby. Well, still, that chamber raised bird been raised in a bubble. He thinks, hey, that's fair game. Let's go latch onto that spaniel and try and eat it. Depending on the species and individual, that's possible. But a wild caught bird, unless he's starving, and even if he's starving, is probably not going to do those kind of shenanigans. So an inexperienced novice has less things to worry about because the bird's got more sense than he does. He already realizes spaniels are not on the menu, and he doesn't see you as a parent. So the weird aggression and other problems are not going to be an issue because he sees you as a predator who for some reason feeds him and hasn't eaten him yet. So he's not as likely to have the bad manners of a hand-raised baby, and he's got more sense than a chamber-raised, a young immature bird. So anyway, that was a really long answer to your short question. Hope you know.
So it makes my mind tick though. Is that where catching mink come from then?
Okay, so yeah, go back to your original question. Yeah. So I like I said, I progressed. I didn't really have a hands-on helper or like mentor as a child. Well, I guess I kind of did. My grandfather was a horse trainer, but that was it. He wasn't interested in anything else, horses and cattle dogs. So his limit was specialized in one specific realm, and nothing else was really interesting to him. I mean, maybe a casual interest, but nothing very deep. And I would go and visit him and learn, some animal husbandry and things from him for sure. But I definitely think I inherited my passion from him because he's just as passionate about horses as I am about my other goofy stuff. So my interest in animals and passion were probably inherited directly from him because a lot of my traits really are like his. I'm more like his son than his grandson in many ways. But I wasn't raised by him. He was far away in another state. It'd be like if you guys had a grandpa in Germany, like he was literally that close and readily available to be around. In fact, like I mentioned, for 2 years, I was in Denmark. I was clear on the other side of the world. So, and that was from 8 till age 10. So anyway, other than my grandfather, I really didn't have any like close friends or family to help support my little animal hobbies and interests. So I totally had to wing everything, read books and just experiment with stuff. And so I slowly ratcheted up my animal experiences from, like I said, from worms all the way up to like raccoons and squirrels and things like that. And then eventually into falconry. With falconry here in the US, you're legally required to have a mentor. It's not an optional thing. You cannot get into falconry unless you have someone who signs off, says, I will be this guy's mentor, and here's my credentials. The government already has it, right? I've been doing it for X number of years, X number of experience, and the government says, sure, you're a good option, which isn't always the case, but in their view, a good option is a mentor. And then you have a legal mentor who says, hey, you shouldn't be doing it this way. Let's do it that way. So I did have a mentor in falconry, like I said, legally required here. But other than that, my whole growing up, I had no mentors other than like specifically horses and dogs with my grandfather. So while I was in the midst of my falconry craze, I moved to a little town that was right next to, or a little house that was right next to a mink farm. Literally had like one on every side of us and down the street and everywhere were these mink farms. And I didn't know much about mink. I knew that they're in the weasel family, but that was about it. I didn't know their habits in the wild or anything. I couldn't even tell you what color they were, like, because the mink farms, obviously, they're every color. So I started asking around, what's a mink? And people told me, oh, they're the most vicious, horrible creatures alive. They'll kill everything. You can't tame them. You can't train them. The kind of general consensus that the general public has on the animals. It doesn't matter if you get one as a baby, they'll like attack you when they grow up, or even before they grow up, they'll bite you. So I got, instead of, the normal reaction to that would be, oh, that's a horrible creature. I don't want anything to do with it. My reaction, I mean, I was a stubborn 17, 18-year-old boy. I was right in that age. And I'd already had experience in falconry and trained squirrels, and I at that point was living with my grandfather. So at that point I did have a lot of very hands-on tutoring from my grandfather, and I'd had been that way for over, it had been like 2 years at that point. So I did have a lot of, at that point, horse training experience, cattle dog training experience from probably the best mentor you could ever hope for. And like I said, the falconry experience. So I was like, you guys like say this is impossible, but I'm not convinced. I want to try it myself. So that was really the only thing was I wanted to do the quote unquote impossible. That was really what it came down to. So I just waited. People said, oh yeah, they get away from these mink farms from time to time. They run around and kill our cats and stuff. So you'll see one eventually. So I was always on the lookout, but it took a little while for just bad luck, I guess, before I finally found one. And once I found one, all I did was basically tame it. And that was it. And I was like, well, that wasn't that hard. Like, I don't know what you guys are talking about. Like, I mean, I had to put
hang on. Because if it's the one I'm thinking of, was the first. So when I watched your content, was Sugarno the first mink or the not?
No. Right.
So
this was years before that. This was 2000 and I don't even know if YouTube existed. It was in 2003. So like I couldn't even filmed it with a digital camera. Like there was no it was a long time ago. When did YouTube come out? I don't think it existed then. Because the internet was barely being publicly available at that point. But anyway, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
I started out with just a gray mink that I found, tamed it. Wasn't that big of a deal. It was just a novelty pet. But then I ran into what's that?
You can't be like, just tamed a mink. You can't just gloss over that. You can't be like, I just found a mink and I tamed it. I mean, what? Talk us through at least the first step of
process
just taming a mink.
Sure. So I thought about it and I was just like, okay, what makes logical sense? I'm like, okay, well, when you have a little squirrel or hamster or chipmunk or whatever, they don't like to be held. That freaks them out and they bite you. But if you handle them more gently, they won't bite you. So I was like, because I trained, like I said, I tamed wild caught chipmunks and squirrels and stuff growing up. And so I just figured I'll apply those principles to mink, see if it works. So I released it into a horse stall. And this horse stall was, obviously cement walls, solid sliding door, no way for it to get out. And I was kind of scared because I'd heard all these horror stories. So I put on like 3 layers of jackets and like 3 layers of gloves and like multiple layers of pants. Do you guys know the story? Do you guys watch that movie called The Christmas Story over there? Never heard of it? Doesn't matter. Basically, like if I'd have fallen on my back, I might not have been able to get up. Like I was just covered in layers, and it was out of fear for this vicious little creature that was gonna like try and kill me when I went in there. None of that was warranted. I walked around, like I said, it run in circles, just trying to get out, jump, trying to jump up the walls, which it couldn't because there's slick, brick walls. There's nothing to grip a hold of. And so I just walked around and I put my hand underneath it and I'd use the other hand to kind of herd it over one hand. One hand's on the ground, the other one's kind of chasing it. And then it would go over my hand and I'd lift it up and then it would jump off that hand and I would quickly reach the other hand in front and do that again until, eventually it would jump down and I'd have to start all over again. And I did that till finally I got in a rhythm and I could hold it. And it's just like, I don't know if you've ever seen a little kid holding a hamster and that's just going from hand to hand. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
Yeah.
Same idea, but it's a mink and I'm trying not to get bitten in the process. But with that particular individual, she never tried to bite me. And I was treating her respectfully. Like I said, I didn't grab her. I just kind of let her walk from hand to hand like a living treadmill. And she was like, oh, okay, whatever. And eventually she calmed down enough. She realized I wasn't trying to hurt her and I could scoop her up. And she's still a little wild and a little difficult to handle, but I got her calmed down, taught her that, hey, you know what? I also provide food. I'm a cool guy. I don't hurt you. Eventually, I wrestled her down and got a harness on her, and then we just left it on. We didn't take it on and off. I just would clip the leash on and unclip the leash because we didn't want to stress her out each and every time we put the harness on, And then I'd take her out on walks, and yeah, like I said, I trained her to come to a little food call. I'd blow a whistle or whatever. I assumed I used my falconry whistle as my guess. Whistled to her. She came over and feed her. And yeah, it wasn't that eventful. And then eventually I just took the gloves off, layer by layer came off. Eventually I had 1 coat and gloves, 1 coat, 2 pairs of gloves, and then 1 coat, 1 pair of gloves. And then eventually took the gloves off and yeah. And I don't know the time frame for that. That was so many years ago. I'd be lying if I tried to guess. That could have been over months or weeks. definitely wasn't days. It was either months or weeks, but I couldn't tell you.
So I have a bit of a question. You've gone into this very nonchalantly, mink. Everyone else assumes that minks are, land piranhas here, that they are just going to
They are.
just be snapping.
They are.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just he's managed to tame them. It's just that he's got a friend in one.
Is there an animal out there, I imagine, Bengal tiger withstanding, that you would be like, nah, not going to try it? Because it sounds like you've just tried to tame everything just for shits and giggles. Is there anything what would you draw the line at? What would be like, there's not really much goal in this?
Something that tell me, I don't really have much interest in like big cats, things like that. But like a wolverine, sure, I would love to. If it was legal, I'd totally go trap a wolverine and try it. No questions asked. I am actually working towards getting a badger, and my goal is if I can get the legality, which is the complicated part, or I would have already done it 15 times by now. Get a badger, but I want to go out and catch it by hand. You go spotlight them, find them while they're running above ground before they get to because ours don't live in a big set like your guys's. Ours dig a hole, sleep in it for the night, and then travel across ground, and then dig another hole and sleep in it for a night. So you can catch them above ground just running around. And I'm sure you guys can catch them away from their sets too. But for us, it's a little more reasonable to catch one just running around above ground. So just run it down, grab it, bring it home, and see if I could train it. Maybe I can't. Maybe I'll find out, no, dude, not going to work. But you can't give up on the first animal because you might have just got a bad egg, right? Try a next one, and then the next one. And then by about the third one, you can start saying, you know what, maybe this isn't going to work, But really, there's so much variation between animals. They range from impossible to easy when it comes to mink. I know a girl who caught a wild-caught, fully adult, fully mature male, at least like 3 years old, because his teeth had already started to wear and smooth out. Caught it within days. She was feeding it barehanded. Same thing. She handled it correctly. She didn't just grab it, She handled it respectfully, just like I described with that mink. Within days, she was feeding it barehanded. Within a few weeks, maybe a month, it escaped. Some little neighbor kid came and left it and opened the cage and left it open. And she went out and it was under the shed. She called it. He come right out and she put him away. She was like, why didn't he leave? And I'm like, I don't know. He must figure it was a good place to live. I don't know. Or maybe she got lucky and she happened to get out there just as he escaped. We don't really know. All we know is he was under the shed. He hadn't even left their yard. So, and then you've got other individuals that I've heard of that people have caught and literally they'll starve themselves to death. So there's no taming them. They won't even survive in captivity. They'll literally beat themselves to death on the cage, refuse to eat, and die. So you've got from one extreme of, hey, that was easy, to, dude, he died. That's how bad it worked. He died. So I've heard of every extreme and everything in between. Most are obviously difficult, take a lot of patience, a lot of time, and doing things just right, and it'll work. Others, it's just like they seem to just be born easy to handle. So I'm sure that's the case with the vast majority of wild animals. I've dealt with wild rats. You've got wild rats who range from they were born in captivity. They're just genetically wild. Their parents were wild. And they will attack you like every single day you go to feed them. They're hitting the edge of the cage. And then you got another rat. You caught him. And within a couple of days, you could reach into the cage and pet him. And as long as you don't like grab him or something, he's not going to bite you. And that's, it's not just mink is what I'm getting at. I think most wild animals have a range of ridiculously difficult to ridiculously easy. I mean, same thing applies to birds of prey. I've seen of the same species of falcon, one individual is just ridiculously difficult and the others like practically tames itself. So I think that just seems to be across the board with most wild animals. Just some range in one direction or another. Some tend to be more easy. Some tend to be more difficult. And some have a bigger range. Some are more unified. Others are more crazy variation, like mink. So where a badger lies in that, I don't know. And I really hope to find out. But that's not up to me. It's up to the government and their silly laws. So
yeah. So where did you where did the hunting part of it come in then? So you've trained what, the first mink, or did that come later, or what?
Yeah, so my first mink I just tamed, didn't do anything special with. I ran into a mink farmer who saw the mink that I had tamed, and I was like, look, I got a tame mink. Oh, I did the impossible, all excited about it. And he's like, yeah, well, that's a blue colored mink, just like a gray. He's like, those are the most docile of all the mink. If you were going to tame one, that would be the one. And I'm like, well, what's the hard ones then? He's like, well, the black ones, they're impossible. You'll never train a black mink like that. So then I had to go out and get a black mink, found one in the neighbor's garage. They called me, hey, can you help me? Because at this point I was kind of known as the local mink guy, They call me up, hey, there's a mink in my garage. Can you come help get it out? So I went and caught that mink, tried to tame it. But this one, I said, you know what? My first mink was so successful, I'm going to try a completely different method and see if it works too. Maybe it'll work better. It fell flat on its face. So I tried to handle that next mink like I would a bird of prey. So what do you do when you catch a wild hog? You catch it, it's called casting. You hold it and you put the equipment on it, the jesses and the anklets. And so you're physically holding it still, and then you put the jesses and anklets on, and then you put it on your glove, and you just sit in a quiet, dark room, or not. Well, it depends on the guy. Everyone's got a different method, but I did a dimly lit room, not a completely dark room, with all the windows shades down so he's not seeing the window outside. And you just sit quietly and hold the jesses, and the bird like flops over and you gently put it back on your glove, and then he flops over and you gently put him back on the glove. Pretty soon he'll sit there for a minute. He's not really perching, he's like laying there like he's half alive, and then he falls off and you gently put him up, and you just sit there long enough that eventually he gets used to you, and he's like, oh, you're not that bad, and then he perches on you, and then eventually you start feeding him by hand, and you go from there. So I thought, well, hey, that works great for birds of prey. Let's try it with a mink. So I got this little black mink, and I held it down, and I put a harness on it, just like you would a bird of prey. You cast it, put on the anklets and jesses, put on a harness, and then I held the harness so he'd have to sit on my glove. It was just a nightmare. He just freaking out, trying to attack me the whole time, like did not work and never worked. And finally, weeks down the road, I ran into a bunch of little kids, young boys, out poking sticks in a woodpile. And I'm like, I bet you they found a mink. And I go over there, what are you guys doing? We're going to kill a mink. And I said, no, you're not. Get out of here. Go play. Go do something else. And so I caught this mink, and ended up being a male. These first two are females. So the gray one and the first black one were females. So I caught this male mink, and I'm like, what do I do with him now? Because like these kids are going to kill it if I leave it here. I only have one big, nice cage for a mink. And I was like, well, you know what? I kind of screwed up that female, that black female. This male was black as well, by the way. So they're both black, just one's male, one's female. I was like, you know what? I kind of screwed up that one. That method clearly wasn't going well. How about I just start fresh and let this female, I'll put her underneath the cage, and I'll put food out for like a cat, and let's have an experiment. See if she'll keep coming back and I could feed her. Well, it didn't work. She just took off. She was gone the first day. So I put the male in her cage, and I started over. I was like, okay, I was off to a good start with the first mink. Let's do that and add food. So instead of just like trying to hold him, how about I start calling him over to me with food, and then eventually get him to step up on my glove. So kind of a falconry method, like you put a bird of prey on a perch, and then you offer him food. Once he's eating from the perch, then you start like get him to step onto your glove, and you tease him with food. So I kind of was like, okay, I'm going to use a different falconry method, but without the restraint crap. And I did the same thing, turned it loose in a stall, offered it food, got it to eat food out of my hand, and then eventually step up, front paws on my hand, and I give it a piece of food, and then let me lift it off the ground for a second, give it food, and then eventually he's letting me hold him. And I was like, wow, that method worked even better. So note to self, no restraint, add food. Okay, great. And so that mink came down super easy. He was even cooler than the first because he was really smart and playful, and he actually seemed to kind of like me. Like the other mink just put up with me. He actually was like friendly to me. He was like, oh, hey, cool, dude. And I'd open the cage, and he would come check me out. Hey, what's up, man? What are we going to do today? Like, he was just really cool. And I named him Rascal. And he reminded me of an otter. He looked like a little black otter. He was just so cool. And I set up a big giant fish tank inside of his enclosure. His enclosure was like a kind of like a off the ground chicken coop. It was made for foxes. It was a fox cage for fur farms. and I just, I grabbed it. That nobody was using it. It was a shut down fur farm. So I took this big old cage, and it's like the size of a chicken coop, but you can't quite walk in it. You have to like scrunch down, and it's off the ground. And anyway, I set him up a big, and this is with the cage I used for all my mink at this point in the story. And I put a big old fish tank, and he'd swim around, and I'd put in, goldfish, or they were too easy. So then I went and caught some faster wild minnows and stuff and put in there and watch them catch things. And I was like, man, this is really cool. And I got thinking, man, I wonder if I could do something with this mink. And I kind of had a casual thought in my mind. And then I found a book. Have you guys ever heard of the book called A Sporting Chance?
Yeah.
Okay. So I got it.
No.
I believe. What's that?
I said I haven't. So what's it about?
So I got the book, I believe, for Christmas or my birthday, which are both right next to each other. But I'm December 20th is my birthday. So anyway, I got it for one of those things, I believe. And it was back when Amazon first came out, and Amazon was just a book company. And I got on Amazon. I was like, this is so cool. It's like a online library. We were barely just getting internet in the house. And now I can look up books, and so I'm looking up cool books, and I find this book, and I'm like, oh, I want this for, like I said, birthday or Christmas. So someone bought it for me, my mom or dad or grandma, grandpa, someone. And I'm like, cool. So I'm reading through this book, and A Sporting Chance is basically all these primitive methods of hunting. Some of them are animals. So like, hunting with a cheetah, pretty normal standard stuff. Hunting with a cheetah, various types of dogs, terriers, hounds, sight hounds, things like that. They've got falconry, of course. They've got some really goofy things like hunting with a toad. It was just some goofy experiment the author came up with. He got these big giant toads, and he'd set them out, and he'd lift a grain sack, and the mice would run out, and the toad would gulp it down. And then like obviously ferreting's in there. But in there, there's also primitive tools. So like blowguns and atlatls and boomerangs. And so there's also tools. It's not just animals, but primitive tools, and then various ways of hunting with animals. Obviously ferreting was in there, but they also had fishing with a cormorant and fishing with otters. And so when I read, obviously, the ferrets and the otters part, it really made me think of my mink. I was like, you know what? My mink is kind of like a ferret otter. Like they'll go in holes just like a ferret and catch like rats and stuff like that. But they'll swim down in the water like an otter and catch fish and stuff. I was like, I wonder what I could do with a mink. And so I started the book. Basically, I maybe thought about it a little bit before. With my falconry background, it's just kind of natural to start thinking, what could I hunt with? But the book really put the idea deep in my heart rather than just a casual, I wonder. It became a goal, an ambition of mine. I want to see what I could do with this. And so I started for the first time actually researching what mink did in the wild. I knew a little bit from talking to my wildlife biology teacher. He said, oh, they're the jack of all trades, master of none. They can do this like a weasel, and they can do that like an otter, but they're not as good as the otter or good as the weasel. They could just they run the middle, being able to do a little bit of both. And I got one of the things that really inspired me reading that book was a part where the author was trying to get rid of some muskrats. And I know you guys don't have those over in your country, or at least I know there's some imported that have been released in Europe, but I'm pretty sure you don't have any in the UK. Is that right?
I have a very good friend who lives in Holland, and one of his jobs, he will literally control muskrats all year round with big body grip traps, kicking holes in dike sides and stuff like that. I went out with them for a couple of days, so I do know what they are. They're a big vegetarian, vegetable eating rat, aren't they, that basically digs into bank sides. A little bit like a beaver, aren't they? They have underground entrances and all that sort of stuff.
Yep, just like a mini beaver with a rat tail kind of thing. They'll eat a lot of the same food, live in the same habitats, dig. I have written my own book. Someone made that comment.
Just for anyone who hasn't watched it, they're probably akin to a big water vole in this country. That's what we'd be looking at, something like that, yeah. Like
a huge water vole. So they're like the weight of a rabbit. Super aggressive, big beaver-like teeth. But water voles would be very similar, I would assume. Obviously, never seen a water vole. But anyway, in this book, he had some muskrats digging in the bank of his pond. They had a little, cute little pond in his backyard, and the muskrats were digging it up, and he's like, man, I got to get rid of these things. And he had these ferrets that he'd used to do some ratting with in like a chicken coop and like his barn and stuff. And he's like, oh, it works great for rats. Let's try it for muskrats. So he sticks the ferrets down, and it just does not go as planned. The ferrets get their heads like split open and like almost drowned and like all this stuff. It just was horrendous. And I've talked to other guys who've tried it, and apparently that's kind of the general outcome. You try and put a ferret down a muskrat hole, and it'll work sometimes, but then it won't. You'll end up with a dead or dying ferret because they're just too aggressive. They like a rat's bite is a joke. A brown rat, the biggest, meanest brown rat biting you is a joke. A little baby muskrat biting you sucks, let alone a big adult. Like they just, the wounds are just so much more horrendous. And I've been bitten lots by both. Well, not so much muskrats. Muskrat bites, limited. I've maybe 6 times my whole life. Brown rats. I don't know
Next question: getting bitten. I had to ask you. Yeah. How many times have you been bitten? Loads.
I have permanently jacked up fingers from muskrats. I don't even know where there's a rat scar. I couldn't figure out where. Like, I'm sure there's probably one somewhere. But muskrats, like, I have permanently jacked up fingers. Look at this goofy bump. That's not supposed to be there. There's no knuckle there. Why do I have this goofy knuckle? And both fingers, you see, and they don't close all the way either. Look, I can't. I'm starting to get the right angle here. I can't even close my finger all the way. See, that's as far as I could close it. See, that's not normal. It's just from scar tissue for muskrats.
How is that happening? How are you being bitten so often by muskrats?
You stick your hands in their hole and grab them, and that's kind of what happens.
Keen, isn't he?
The other thing is, when you're holding them by their tail, if you don't pay attention, they come up their tail and bite you. I've had a real bad bite from that. So you got to watch them and kind of swing them so they don't come up their tail. So you grab them by the tail. You either got to get way at the end of their tail or just like kind of shake them down and pay attention. But you get distracted and watching the mink, and all of a sudden, son of a gun, they're biting you.
I love this. This is my idea of a childhood all the way through into your adulthood. It's fucking phenomenal. I love it.
But yeah, so what was it? Oh, so anyway, back to the poor ferrets. So the ferrets, like, I don't remember if they actually died, but it was just bad. And the guy was like, yeah, never doing that again. We're not putting ferrets down muskrat holes. It doesn't end well. So I got thinking, dude, man, my mink could go through a half a dozen ferrets. Like, they're way tougher, way stronger, way faster, way meaner, everything. I'm sure, this is just me thinking, obviously I'd never tried it. I'm just saying, like, I don't know how a mink couldn't kill a muskrat. So I started thinking about it. So I did some research and I looked into it. Well, lo and behold, the number one predator for muskrats is mink. And I'm like, oh, sweet. I was correct. They not only can, but they do it all the time in the wild. So I got thinking, so I started daydreaming about this. Man, we could go catch fish, and then we could go hunt muskrats, and then we could, I never really thought about the normal barn rat very much. That wasn't really a thought at the time. But I started daydreaming. Maybe I could catch some bunnies, and, what could we do with these things? And so it became pretty much like a daydream at this point. But at this point in my life, I was 18, 19 years old, and so I'm a member of what's called the LDS faith. A lot of people call us Mormons. It's not really the name of our church or faith at all, but that's our nickname. Everyone says, "Oh, they're Mormons." If you guys ever see the guys with white shirts and ties and the little tags that go around, knock on people's doors.
Yeah.
So when you're 19 at that point, it's actually since changed to 18. But at that point, when you're 19 as a young man, you have the opportunity, if you want to, you can go on a mission. That's the earliest you can go is 19. You can go like at 22 or 20, whatever, 4 or whatever. But 19 is the earliest you can go. And I wanted to go on a mission. And so that was kind of a damper for my mink plans, because when you go on a mission, it's a full-time thing. It's not just like, oh, we're going to go on this little trip for like a week or whatever. It's a 2-year commitment, and it's full-time. You don't have girlfriends. You don't play in sports leagues. You don't get a job. You're committing your entire life for 2 years to nothing but serving and helping other people. You go around, you teach people the gospel of Jesus Christ. You teach them about Christ, teach them about the Bible, teach them about the Book of Mormon. You also do a lot of service. You help people that are maybe addicted to substances or shovel an old lady's walk, service projects, all kinds of things. And that's what you're doing 24/7. Well, not really 24 because you have to sleep, right? But outside of sleeping, it's more than a full-time job. You're looking at, let me see, you left the apartment at, see if I can remember the schedule. I think it was 10 a.m. You left the apartment and you don't get back until 9 p.m. So what is that, 11-hour days, something like that? Or is it 13-hour days? Anyway, you get the point. It's a, let's just for argument's sake call it a 12-hour day every day, except for one day they have what's called preparation day, where you do kind of the worldly things you need to do. I don't mean like recreational world. Well, I mean, you can go play soccer, whatever, but like you need to like wash your clothes, right? You need to wash your car. There's things that need to be done for yourself, buy groceries, all of that. So that's all done on one day. So once you're done buying your groceries and writing letters home and washing your clothes, well, then you have extra time to go play soccer or whatever sport you like. For me, I'm not big into ball sports. It just doesn't interest me. So I got books from the library, and I'd read about mink, and I daydream about, I'm going to do this cool thing and you move around as a missionary. You're not in one place for the full 2 years. You're kind of in one place for, 3 to 6 months. And then you'll go to another city in the same general area. So my mission was in Iowa. So I stayed in the United States. I didn't leave the country. But I have a brother who went to Germany. I have another brother who went to Alaska. So you could go all over. My wife's family, they served mostly in Guatemala. So, I mean, you could go wherever. I happen to go in the central part of the United States. But you go to it, even though you're staying in that same area, you get moved around every, like I said, 3 to 6 months roughly to like another city. And so I would end up, my point in bringing that up is I would go to a new library every 3 to 6 months. And so I would read everything in that library on my one day off of a week about mink or something related to that. Or if I had a companion that didn't love sports, I would talk him into, hey, let's go walk down the river and see if I can see mink tracks or something, things like that. And when I got off my mission, and don't get me wrong, I wasn't distracted. I was very, very dedicated missionary. But when I had that one day of the week, that's what I did with my time rather than playing, soccer. Or what you guys call football. Sorry, football, but which is the better name. Soccer is such a stupid name, and football is a ridiculous name for what we call football. There's no feet involved. It's retarded. But
yeah, I agree. You should make a petition to rename it Hand Egg. I mean, I think that'll go down very well.
Or call it soccer. Soccer makes more sense. You're like running into people. You're kind of socking them, right? Soccer should be American football, and football should be football everywhere. Not anyway. I don't really care. I don't care about sports. But so when I got home from my mission, I was like, boom, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get a mink. And I went to some mink farms. And this time I wanted to try with baby because I hadn't tried a baby yet, right? The 3 mink that I'd had previously were all fully grown adults when I caught them. I was like, I want to see what it's like to raise a baby. And I finally found a mink farm that was willing to help me out, got a baby mink, bottle raised it. And my main goal, like I said, those other mink, I didn't have a goal of hunting. I was just like experimenting with them. My main goal was I'm going to either hunt or fish with this mink. Did you have a question?
Yeah. So you mentioned before, talking of falconry, there's a world of difference between what you refer to as a pen-raised bird or, a chamber-raised bird and a wild bird. With the mink, did you notice a significant, because I know in a lot of fur farms, they will breed for docility. They will breed animals to be docile because they're the ones that don't bite the workers at the end of the day, and the assholes get knocked on the head and go and see Jesus. So with that, you need to sort of like make sure that was there a big difference between the mink that you found from the mink farm, the one that you raised by hand, opposed to the one that you raised from the leaf litter pile outside?
Can I just say, Joseph, before you start, this might be a great time to tell the story of Washugano.
I'll get into him. So the main difference between so you've got a couple different mink. You've got like you said, the what I call ranch mink. They're domesticated. Here in the Americas, we don't, that I've ever heard of, select for temperament at all, other than like temperament traits that happen to be advantageous, but they don't purposely select for it. You're right. In Denmark, they do select for temperament. I've seen farms where they're like petting them and stuff. That is not done, to my knowledge, at least in the majority of Americans. They're pretty much like, hey, do you have the right fur color, coat, quality, size? Are you producing big litters of babies and raising them? That's it. They don't care at all about, hey, are you biting me or not? They just assume they're all mean and they don't really care. There is a selection for confidence, though, because a more nervous mink isn't going to do one of those things. They're not going to get as big because they're not eating as well, or they're going to kill their kits because they're running all over the place and not taking care of them. So they do breed for a more confident mink, but not on purpose. It's just a byproduct of, hey, the confident ones eat better, grow better, eating better, making them grow better is what I meant. They produce more offspring without killing them over stress, things like that. Or they're willing to breed. Maybe a male on the male side, he's too nervous to breed. You know, the ones that are confident and like, I'm just going to go breed, they're the males that get kept. The females that are confident, like, I'm just going to take care of my babies, I don't care about you people, they're going to be bred. But there is no selection for, hey, you know, this one didn't bite me as much. I shouldn't say no. It's, if there's any selection for that, it's very limited and is no farmer I've ever talked to. But yes, I have seen that in European mink farmers, but not in America. So what I've noticed in the genetically wild mink versus the genetically fur farm mink, the differences are, number one, the biggest is size. The fur farm mink are roughly double the size of a wild mink. Females are roughly half the size of a male. So if you look at a wild male and a ranch female, they're roughly the same size. That's how big of a difference they are size-wise. Color, obviously, fur farms come in any color, almost any color. But wild mink all come in the same shade of brown. They have white chin spots and brown bodies. And sometimes that chin spot goes all the way down to their crotch and there's little spots, you know, but that's normal. The fur farms, they try and breed away that white spot because they wanted a uniform color. And generally speaking, and they pick all different kinds of colors. Another difference is their fur type. You could tell the difference on their coat. The wilds have more of a spiky, like muskrat type coat. It's more rough, and the undercoat is thinner. The ranch mink are so much undercoat that sometimes it's poking out through the guard hairs. The guard hairs are very small, very short, usually short and soft, and not so rough looking as a wild mink. So as far as that, you can look at them and say, hey, that's a ranch mink. I don't care where you caught it or found it. That's a ranch mink. I can even go so far as to say, hey, that one's half. Once they get to a quarter, it's really hard to tell. But if you've got half wild, half ranch, yep, that one's, and obviously you don't know the percentage by looking at it, but you could be like, that one's a mix, I guess, a better way to put it. That one's a mix. That one's pure ranch. That one's pure wild. But once they get to like 1/4 ranch, 3/4 wild, no way to tell the difference. Other way around, 1/4 wild, 3/4 ranch, really hard to tell the difference.
So I was about to ask this question that Brian's just brought up here, which is the best to train for hunting, male or female? And I'm going to add to that, which is the best for, because if you've got a larger mink, which has got a different coat composition and ostensibly probably going to react to the environment a bit better, which is going to be then better? A really big male ranch, mink, is he going to do better at hunting, or do you actually want the small, spry female wilds? I mean, which is there one that's better than the other? Is there one that's more prized than the other to be using here, or is it just a case of which one is best?
So let me stick with the ranch first, and then I'll get into female versus male, because that does go whether they're wild or ranch mink. The wild female, the gender differences stay the same. But let's focus on the ranch versus wild difference. So the wild mink are noticeably more athletic. They're quicker. They're often more water oriented. They like to swim a little more, and that's not always the case. There are ranch mink who love the water just as much. But it's if you take a large number of mink, you're going to get more water oriented wild ones than ranch. But you're going to find plenty of both that love water. So it's not a huge difference. You're nitpicking when you talk there, but athletic ability, the ability to climb, jump, run, be quick and nimble is clearly an advantage on the wild side. Now, here's a shocking advantage to the ranch mink is that confidence building that they've done through breeding the best of the best that thrive in a mink farm environment, that actually translates to hunting. And here's what I believe. I believe when they raise a whole litter of kits together, the more aggressive, I'm going to push everyone out of the way and eat all the food, they're more likely to be bred because they grow bigger. They're eating more food. And the ones that are kind of laid back, get picked on, they don't grow as big, so they're not as likely to breed. And so the more aggressive ones are actually being selected for in the farm. And I found that from my experience, the ranch mink on average are more aggressive and confident hunters than the wild. The wilds have a little more self-preservation. They're a little more nervous about stuff. They're quicker to be like, I don't know if that's really prey. The ranch mink are like, dude, it's breathing, it's prey. And they'll like grab a dog or a sheep or something stupid. Whereas a wild one, they could be raised in the identical same circumstances. He's like, I don't know. That kind of looks like a predator to me. I think I'm going to leave that alone. And there's a wide range. So you could find very timid ranch mink and very bold wild mink. So everything that I'm saying is within a range of temperaments. There are exceptions to almost every rule. The athletic ability, it's really hard to find an exception for. That one's pretty much across the board. Wild mink are going to be quicker and more athletic. I finding an exception for that is going to be really hard. But the temperament, there's a huge variety. There are wild mink that will straight up attack dogs. There are ranch mink that are timid and not very aggressive, But generally speaking, the ranch mink tend to be more confident and bold. The wild mink tend to be more careful and cautious. Though they're all bold and aggressive hunters on average, that's where it's going to sway. So as far as size goes, size is a double-edged sword. So a bigger animal is more powerful. That's just the case. But a smaller animal can fit in smaller holes. So really, it's going to depend on what you're hunting. If you're trying to get into a tight little rat burrow, you're going to want the smallest, wiriest little mink you can get a hold of. If you're trying to go into a big old wide muskrat burrow, it doesn't matter. You can't find a mink too big. So size is helpful because now he's brawling with the muskrat, but he's bigger and more aggressive and more confident. I really like an in-between. Get some of the speed and agility of the wild and a little bit of bulk and power and confidence from the ranch and get kind of a happy medium in between is my preference. I would say the best mink you're ever going to find is a really tough, confident wild mink. But on average, it's going to be harder to find. But yeah, if you were to say the best mink you'll ever have, it'd be just if you get a really confident, aggressive wild mink. But since that's harder to find, it's easier to just do a blend of the two, and then they'll come out more consistently. It's easier to find. Now, as far as the genders, like I said, roughly double the size. Males are roughly double the size of females, but they're also built and mentally and physically more for battle. They've got bigger canines, bigger heads, stronger shoulders, thicker necks, and a way more confident attitude. A female mink is going to be more nervous and running along the edges of buildings and water and trying to look for cover. A buck might just walk through the middle of a field. Whatever, man. If you want to roll, let's brawl, man. They're on average are a lot more confident animal. And that also goes to prey. A female is more likely to not. It's pretty reasonable to find a male mink that will kill muskrats, but you have to look a little bit to find a female that will kill muskrats. Part of it is size difference, but like I said, you can find a small little wild male who's smaller than a ranch female, and he's doing it better. So it's not just the size difference. A lot of it's in their head. And obviously being stronger than the muskrat helps, but it's mostly in their head. And males average, way more confident, more aggressive towards predators. Now males do, though they're more aggressive towards predators, they are actually easier to handle. They're less aggressive towards, generally speaking. Now the worst mink you're ever going to run into is a male. as far as worse attacking you is what I mean. The most aggressive, vicious mink you're ever going to run into is a male, without question. But on average, they're going to be easier. All your worst ones will be males, but on average, they're actually going to be easier to handle because they're confident. They don't see you as big of a threat as a female does, so they're not as nervous. But that also means if they want to get you, they're going to come swinging. So I, in general, very much prefer males. If I need them to fit, I'd rather just get a tiny little wild male that fits. But that's not always possible. So sometimes you're kind of stuck being forced to use females just so they can fit down the hole. But if I could get males that fit down the hole, oh, no questions asked, I'm going to get a male. What were you going to say? I saw you were trying to say something while I was in mid-thought.
Yeah, I mean, it's so amazing just to listen to you. It's just like it's incredible. But what I want to know is, you've done all this. You've not domesticated, but you've trained your mink. You have done this. At which point did you think, I'm going to make some money out of this? I mean, how did the thought process evolve that I can use this semi-feral animal to make a living? I mean, how did that occur? I mean,
well, let me ask you something real quick. How much of the background noise can you guys hear?
Oh, keep going.
We're
It's
fine?
brilliant.
Okay. Because my kids are running around amok in the background.
Brilliant.
I don't know how much you can hear.
Absolutely brilliant. Yeah, no,
Okay.
keep going. That's what kids are there for.
Okay. So let's see. So how it turned into a business, it was really by chance. It was no goal of mine. I was working professionally to become a financial advisor. And my goal with that was I wanted to have the freedom to be able to do what I wanted. So I first started out in college wanting to become a university professor because I wanted to be able to do studies on animals and all of this. And I thought, well, that'd be great because, I could get paid to learn about animals. How cool would that be? And as I was heading down that path, I started to realize the goofy politics and other bullcrap that you have to deal with as a university professor, that you're not free to just go study what you want. You have to talk someone into it and get funding over here and funding over there and justify every step you're taking. And I'm just like, you know what? I want to fund my own stuff and not have to deal with all the bull crap. So I decided to go build my own business as a financial advisor. And I was working on that, very dedicated towards that. And while I was going along, I was, doing this weird mink experiment. And I started out with my YouTube channel on my first baby mink. So it was, many years later, it was 2008 at this point. I'd already gone on my mission, like I described. I'd had those first 3 mink that I tamed, or I guess I failed one of them, right? I tamed 2, failed 1. I went on my mission for 2 years. So now we're at 2008 and I'm raising this first baby mink. And I was like, man, nobody's ever done this to my knowledge. I need to document it. And I started out with like notes. I had a little notepad and I was posting videos just to share. I actually found some little niche groups of pet mink people. Some were over in the US, or some were in the US, some were over across seas, and they had pet mink. They didn't do anything useful with them. They didn't try to hunt with them or anything, but they had discovered that if they did everything just right, they could have pet mink. And so I was like, oh, cool. I'm not the only one out there with a tame mink. I'm not this, like I said, when I first did it, I thought I was the only guy. And then I started realizing, I'll bet you I'm not. Someone somewhere had to have tried this and been successful. Obviously a lot of people tried, but tried it and was successful. So I started searching online and I found this little niche group called Pet Mink. And, man, they had a lot of stupid ideas and a lot of misinformation just rampant on that page. It was mostly women, and they were very, no offense to women, but they were very emotional women. They weren't very logical women. They were fur mommy type women. And there's just a lot of nonsense being spread on these pages. But what was my point in talking about that? Hold on. So I was trying to correct the nonsense. I was like, you guys are stupid. That's not true. Oh, yeah, well, I've had mink for X number of years. Well, it doesn't matter. You've been doing it wrong for X number of years. Look. And so I started posting videos showing what I was doing. I was like, look, I turned my mink loose. It came back when I called. That's possible. Well, I guess maybe you got lucky. And, then we'd have these weird, dumb arguments online. But I started posting videos basically to show them, look, you don't know everything. You're wrong. And I was showing them these videos, and it wasn't just to prove them wrong, kind of me being arrogant. Also, it was an educational thing. It was like, look, for the people who are open-minded, look, this is how I'm doing it. And for the people who are closed-minded, look, you're wrong. Quit being stupid. Here's video evidence. I'm not just telling stories online, right? Because you could say anything online. Yeah, my mink does calculus. Like, nobody can prove me wrong, right? But when you have a video of your mink doing calculus, then how can they argue it? So that's what I was using YouTube for, was to educate and to correct people and to show people how it was done. Well, pretty soon I started realizing, hey, this is a good way for me to document what I'm doing. I don't have to write all these notes. I can make videos of it, and I could refer to them later and be like, oh, hey, that's what I did back then. This is what I'm doing now. So I began to use the videos more to educate people. And I eventually got rid of those stupid pet mink groups and realized, you know what, you guys don't want to be helped. You don't want to know the truth. You want to live in your goofy la-la lands. And so I just kind of discontinued even associating with those people. And I started creating my own little world through YouTube, showing people what I'm doing. And as you can imagine, we don't need to get into that. So anyway, that was my purpose for YouTube, was just to show people, hey, look, it can be done. It's not impossible. And this is how you do it. And in the process, I ended up doing pest control by accident. So my first hunting experience was I was trying to get this mink to catch fish at a park, and there were rats there because people were feeding ducks. And so the people were feeding ducks, and which brought in the rats, and my mink ended up catching all these rats. Give me 1 second.
So just while you're having a look at that, just tell me, like, you said you weren't, pest control wasn't, or pest management wasn't your first career. You fell into it rather than went into it by design. How has your opinion changed of the pest management industry from the time that you fell into it from before? I mean, now you work on the inside. What are your thoughts around the pest management industry? Are we getting it right? Are we doing it wrong? Are there things we can do better? What that face says that we're getting it wrong.
I come from one direction only. So you got to realize I'm going to be very, very biased in my opinion. And you have to also realize I don't see the successes very often. I come in and fix all the failures. So that's going to give me a viewpoint of you guys always fail, which obviously is not the case. You guys, meaning the conventional methods. I don't even know what you guys do pest control wise. I'm saying you guys, meaning the general pest control industry, does it wrong. And that's a very skewed version because I don't see the successes. I don't see every time it did work. I see every time it failed and they end up calling me. But how I got into it was really, it was just that. I wasn't seeking to do pest control. I was just learning about mink. I was out trying to catch things with my mink, and I found out that rats were a locally available common animal that I could catch with my mink, and it was fun. Well, then people learned, hey, this guy catches rats. Word of mouth through friends. This guy catches mouse. It wasn't even nothing to do with YouTube. My YouTube channel was tiny. I had like a couple hundred views per video tops. But local friends would say, oh, you got a rat in your wall? And you've hired Terminex and every other pest control company, and you've gone to the hardware store and bought everything there and nothing's working. You ought to try my friend. He might be able to get it. And I'd show up and say, oh, okay, well, yeah, there's a rat in your wall. Let me get my mink out, put the mink in and kill it. And there you go. And they're like, we've been in this situation for 6 months and we paid $100 trying to get it done with professional people and buying all this stuff, and none of it worked. And you walked in and 15 minutes later, you got the mink and killed it. Are you kidding me? And so they'd give me $100 or whatever. And I'd be like, thanks. And I'd leave. And months down the road, someone else. My very first client, I got because someone called the police on me. So I was at this park that I described with the ducks and the rats and all of that, and I was trying to catch fish. My mink ended up catching rats instead. There's a park sign that says no harassing wildlife. And I'm like, well, they're rats. That doesn't count. And someone's like, well, it sure does count. That's what the law says. And so they call the police, and the police are like, I'm like, it was a lady officer. I'm like, ma'am, you know that doesn't apply to the rats. Come on. And she's like, well, I'm not here to, interpret the law. I just enforce it. I'm like, well, clearly you're not in charge of anything. Who's in charge? Give me their number and let me talk to them. Because if you're dumb enough to think this law applies to rats, then I need to speak to someone who's got a brain. And so I got a phone number of the person in charge of the park, and I called him up, and I'm like, look at this. The police are kicking me out of the park for killing your rats. Like, there's no way you want those rats there. Am I right? And he's like, no, of course I don't want those rats there. I'm like, so I need some kind of official permission or something so the police will leave me alone. So he's like, happily. Let me talk to our lawyers and a few things, and I'll get you that permission and you'll be good to go. We'd love to have you catch those rats. We've been having problems for years and we've never been able to solve it. I'm like, great. Get me that permission. Well, calls back. Sorry, the lawyer says this is a liability and we can't have you there at the park catching your rats. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I found a smoke bomb. I know you hired someone to get rid of these rats. And I know they didn't do a darn thing because we caught 10 rats in one day. So why is it you can hire this guy to fail, but you can't let me do it for free? And he said, you know what? Get a business license and I'll fire him and hire you. And this is my first ever client before I even had like friends and neighbors telling me to come get a rat in their wall. And I'm like, done. So I went and got a business license, and I showed up with a business license. He's like, okay. I think he was calling my bluff. I didn't think he thought I would actually do it. So I come back with a business license and say, whoa, okay, well, show me what you do and I'll give you the job. So I have him come out. He meets me at the park, stick my mink down a rat hole. A rat pops out, kills it. Boom, we're done. He's like, you get the job. So now I'm officially hired for the city of South Salt Lake to do all the pest control in this park. And whoever was doing it before was fired. And I went in and fixed their problem. They went from 2 or 3 calls a week about the rats to 2 or 3 calls a year, or maybe even every other year. Dramatically changed their situation. Now, are there no rats at the park? No, of course. They come back. So every month I'm there hitting it. Any rats that are there, I clean them out. So does it completely eliminate all rodents? No, it doesn't. But they're down to the numbers that are so low that nobody's calling them anymore. That I'm not catching 10 a day. Yeah. I'm struggling to get 1, Yeah,
but you know as well as I do. As soon as you start killing a few with dogs or ferrets and I guess mink, the rest wise up, don't they? They might still be there, but they do not start wandering around in the day. They do not start taking the piss. It's almost like there's an APB put out in it where it's like, whoop, hang on, game's changed. Stop. They just don't like it, do they?
Yeah, they get smart, and they either get that or they get smart. Those are their 2 options. Yeah. And we got them cleared out in that park. That was 2012. So I've had that job for a long time, and still there. Even we got a really liberal, loony mayor there who started trying to fire me because no, animals killing animals. You know how they are. And the guy in charge is like, dude. He solved our problem. Do not poke the bear. If he leaves, do you know what we're going to have to deal with? I know, because I was here for X number of years with this problem. 3 phone calls a week from concerned citizens. Is that what you want? Do you want that, Miss Mayor, on your resume? 3 calls a week of people freaking out? We get less than 3 calls a year now. And she's like, oh, okay, well, okay, And she was ready to freak out and fire me because she's some loony from California who, animals killing animals. That doesn't really happen in nature. We watch Bambi and Walt Disney, and they love each other and frolic. Thumper doesn't go, or Flower doesn't kill Thumper. They're friends, And so she was talked out of it. There's like, no, you cannot fire this guy. If you fire this guy, this is what we're going to be stuck with. So anyway, that one job eventually led to, like I said, word of mouth, people saying, hey, I got a rat in my wall. But every call I get, even today, it's, hey, we've hired this guy. We hired that guy. We tried this. We tried that. None of it worked. I went to a pheasant farm. We caught 1,087 rats, if I remember correctly, in 5 days. And they had been shooting trapping. Like there's traps everywhere on that farm. Shooting, trapping, poisoning for years. And that's the numbers that they got up to, was 1,087. And finally, they're like, okay, like we need to try something different because they're just getting more. They're not getting less, they're getting more. They were actually at their max point at that point. They weren't actually getting more. They were just going to continue.
So what happens? So, you mentioned ferrets there, and anyone who's got ferrets has lost a ferret at some point. It's gone down a rabbit hole. It's found a whole load of jelly babies down there. Free lunch, full belly, fallen asleep, come back for the ferret. Losing a ferret down a hole is one thing. Losing a mink in a pheasant farm or a park, I imagine, is a very different thing. So, I mean, have you ever had a mink fail to return? And what happens next? I imagine that's going to be a much bigger impact, both with the people watching and for the environment as well. So, I mean, what happens when a mink doesn't come back, or do they always come back?
Well, at the park, it's not that big a deal. I mean, we have wild mink here, so I would just join the wild mink, But like you said, at a pheasant farm, it's an absolute nightmare. And I have pheasant farmers who are terrified to let me come for the first time. They're desperate because they just basically said, hey, we're going to let our worst enemy in the front door. And they will sit in disbelief saying, I can't believe I'm doing this. I can't believe I'm doing this. I can't believe I'm doing this, But that was only the first couple. Once I had videos of, hey, look, here's me at a pheasant farm. Here's the success. The concerns drastically dropped. But to begin with, the first couple guys were like, what am I doing? Do I really want to try this bad to get rid of rats? But no, actually, so I trained my mink one of two different ways. The most difficult way is to teach them to come back with their kill. That takes months, even years of work. It's very, very difficult. Only certain mink will ever do it. It's just complicated to get them to go in, kill it, and bring it back. Super complicated. Now, I say that it very much depends on the individual mink. Some mink, it's not that hard. Some mink, it's impossible. And most are somewhere in between. The other thing I teach for the vast majority of my mink is the polar opposite. I teach them kill it and leave it. So their first kills. Now, I know this is going to be, I know in your guys' culture, it's a really big, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're doing it. But I do what they call in falconry baggies. I will give them a rat. They doesn't have to be wild caught. We have no qualms over here. That's just like what they do. Hound guys do it with raccoons. I do it with mink. Falconry guys do it with birds of prey. You'll take a peasant.
Joseph, it happens over here. We just call them
dropped.
We just call them dropped. It happens over here. I'm not a fan of it for dogs. I don't think it's needed, but a lot of lads, especially young lads who get them the first dog, who are maybe searching for inspirational, they call it a drop rabbit. That's what they talk about. Bagged whatever, or drop rabbit. Yeah, it happens.
Yeah, and see, we don't really care. That's not a big thing over here. I'm sure at one point it will be, because I mean the liberals are fighting really hard in our country. But like, we don't care. We'll take a coon, we'll catch it, turn it loose for the dogs. It's a great way to start puppies. Falconry, almost every falconer uses baggies here. It's a weird thing. It's like, oh, why don't you use baggies? Well, I don't like the ethics of it. Okay, cool, man. Do it the hard way. Like in the form of falconry, there are flights you cannot achieve without baggies. It's not going to happen. You guys do it the old way 100 times. Oh, we're just going to do wild game. Yeah, you're not going to ever reach the level of a guy with baggies. So there's just certain things that can't be done or are extremely hard to do. And then there's other things that, like you said, it's totally unnecessary. Like, there's no reason to do it. So it just depends on what you're talking about and the specific thing. So for me, I use dropped rats, I guess you want to call them, faggy rats. Yeah. I have no qualms about it. When you see me in videos catching handfuls of live rats and stuffing them in a cage, that's why. I'm going to take them back and use them for young mink and young dogs. And I have a whole setup in my backyard where I could turn a rat loose and he can't get away. Like, there's no exit. He can't burrow out. Like, he's stuck. And I've got tubes and pipes and places for him to hide and wood piles and stuff. Let him back there. It's just basically a practice yard for young dogs and young mink. And I can accomplish if I would have waited around to do it all naturally, I can accomplish in a few weeks what would have took me months to accomplish waiting for real life experience. And so, and not only that, if I only had one mink to train, that'd be another thing too. I could probably go and find all natural setups. But when you're trying to train 6 mink in a day, I don't have time. It's like, okay, get another rat out, get another mink, get another rat out, get another mink, get another rat out, get another mink. Boom. I just did a week's worth of work in an afternoon. And so, what I'll do with back to what I was trying to say is I'll teach a mink to leave the kill and come to me for food. So it's a lot easier to eat a ground up, it's usually muskrat or rat or some other animal that I grind up into basically like hamburger with bones and all. It's a lot easier to eat that than it is to sit and gnaw on a rat. Now, to your point, the baby ones are really easy to snarf down. But if you get them in the habit of, hey, I'm going to give you big rats that are not easy to eat, they're hard to chew, and I do it over and over again, pretty soon, the first thing they think when they kill something isn't, hey, let's settle down and eat it. It's, hey, where's that guy with my easy food? And so I'll set him up a rat in this artificial situation. And the thing is it's got to be an artificial situation, because if it's down in a hole, how much control do I have? None.
Yeah.
If the mink decides to eat it, what can I do about it? I have to, I don't know that have to is a strong word. It's very difficult, if not impossible, to train them to just, hey, let's leave it. Because if he starts chewing on that rat, it's all controlled. I go in and I shove the food in front of his face. Look here, right here. Eat this instead. Eat this instead. And then he starts eating that, and I slide the rat out of the way. But you can't do that when he's down a burrow, when he's in the middle of a wood pile, when he's, in a natural setting. But in my training situations, I can do that. I can literally stick my hand right in his face and say, hey, we're going to slip that out. Or he's down a pipe. Well, it's my pipe. I can lift it up. It's not a pipe down in the ground where, I got control of everything. So I could teach him, hey, kill the rat, eat this food. Kill the rat, eat this food. Okay, now he's not even thinking about eating the rat. Kill the rat, come to me. I give you the food. Kill the rat, come to me. I give you the food. Pretty soon it's just a habit. And when you take them out ratting, they don't even think about eating it. Kill the rat, kill the rat, kill the rat. Step over the babies. Sometimes they won't even kill the babies. They're not moving. Let's just leave them be. Step over the babies. Go find another rat to kill. Kill a rat, kill a rat. Oh, this is so fun. I'm killing a rat, kill a rat. Oh, this is so much fun. Oh, okay, I'm getting kind of hungry. Let me go back to that one guy who'll give me some food. Boom. And so it's extremely rare with most mink for me to have a problem of them. I'm going to settle down and eat what I got, whether it's a nest of babies or an adult I killed or whatever. It's extremely rare when I've trained them like that. The times when it's the biggest problem is when I'm trying to teach them to bring it back, because then they have to actually focus on what they killed. And then it's more likely for them, you know what? I don't want to bring it back. I'll just eat it. So it's kind of funny. The ones I put the most time into to bring it back, if I'm going to have an accident, it's more likely to happen with that mink. The ones I kill to teach to kill and move on, it almost never happens. They're just like, kill, move on, kill, move on, kill, move on. I'm kind of hungry. I'm going to go back to that guy. Okay. And it's really easy. So it's extremely rare. I haven't worked with ferrets enough to say whether that could apply to ferrets or not. My guess is maybe not, because they're not as driven. They're their drive is a lot lower than an average mink. And I'm sure I have no doubt that there are higher drive ferrets and lower drive ferrets. But I mean, like a high drive ferret is like a low drive mink, so it's a very different animal that you're dealing with. So how much that would ever apply to a ferret, I have no idea. It might apply perfectly to ferrets. And you guys need to just bite the bullet, hide it from your neighbors. Don't tell your friends. Get out rats, let them kill it, feed it, whatever. I don't know. I don't know if it works or not. I'm just saying.
For legal reasons, we are not advocating this whatsoever.
What's that?
I said, for legal reasons, we are not advocating this in any way, shape, or form.
Never gonna do it on Jersey. Come
Listen,
back and fly back home.
Joseph, you can read between the lines, right? But when I was a young lad, me and my best friend had an allotment where we kept our ferrets, and all the other allotment holders had nicknamed our allotment Satan's Den.
Yeah.
No,
yeah, I go through
on there, but you can imagine 2 young lads. It was wild.
I go through hundreds of rats doing it like that, and I'll even breed them or buy them. Like if I get desperate and I haven't caught enough wild rats by hand, I'll go buy rats from the reptile guys, And I have a colony ongoing. So when I have a baby, when I find a nest of little pinkies, I'm not putting that to waste. I've got a whole line of females with their own babies at home, and I go and divvy them out and let them raise them. If I
Do
find
they do that?
what's that?
Well, they do that. They won't eat the
Yeah.
pinkies that you drop in.
Some of them will. The more wild females will, but the domestic ones almost never. And so mine are kind of a mix. There's some pure wilds, there's some pure domestics, and there's some that are a cross of the two. And I don't really know what's what, because just because they're colored like a wild doesn't mean they are. And just because they're colored like a domestic doesn't mean they are. They might be 3/4 wild, but the genes lined up and they came out looking white or black or something else. But yeah, now, so I have to pay attention. If the mom's kind of a nervous, wilder acting one, there's a chance she might kill it. But if she's a typical kind of more relaxed, yeah, almost never. It's the more wild blood, wild acting. And like I said, some of the wild ones will do it just fine. It's like the worst of the wild ones. And I don't know that the domestics ever really do it. They all seem to be the pure domestics, really good at just taking on whatever babies you plop in their nest.
Having kept and bred rats for a long time, they will still commit infanticide without a shadow of a doubt. But you're right in saying that the if you already have a litter in cage, then they will adopt others quite well, especially if you sort of like scrunch them all together and share that scent around on all of the pinks, because then the mum runs over and just licks them all clean. And there's a special chemical that they release at point of grooming that makes them a lot more docile as they grow older. It's this epigenetic trait, which is quite amazing, which is baby rats and mice that are cared for by mum grow up to be less of an asshole, which is an interesting microcosm there. But I have a question, and we're going to go over tonight because there's just so.
Oh, we'll just keep going. Yeah, gotta keep going.
You say I've got loads of mink. So do you breed? Are all the mink your own, or do you breed mink to sort of like sell on to other people who want to get into the mink game? Why so many mink?
So I found that there are such crazy differences between personalities that if I just went to the mink farm and purchased a mink, that it was such a crap shot what I was going to get if I wanted a baby. If I wanted an adult, it was a lot more simple. You keep wanting to hear about Washushe. I could go to a farm and look at the adults and find the most aggressive, confident, outgoing mink there and bring them home. And I knew what I had, right? Because I could test hundreds or thousands, literally thousands of mink to get just the right size or temperament or whatever I was looking for, or both, right? I literally have thousands to go through. The local mink farm that I used to always do business with, they had 10,000 to 11,000 babies a year. I mean, I'm going to find what I want if I'm patient, right? Well, the problem is with a baby, you can't test them. Like, how do you test a baby? Oh, you squeaked and you didn't. You crawled and you didn't. I mean, there's nothing you can really do to test them. You could test the moms. Oh, well, the mom's more aggressive, but how do you know the baby's going to be like the mom? So and you have no idea what the dad's like. You don't even know who the dad is for the litter because they don't keep records of the fathers. So you have no idea who the dad is. The dad might be a total schlump and the mom's aggressive, but she's bred by a total chump. So who knows what the babies will be like. So I got to where I was like, man, I really enjoy raising a baby from the beginning. It's a lot more for me, a lot more rewarding process. The mink, you have a better result because you can mold it into what you want. There's a lot to be said for raising one as a baby versus getting one as an adult. And every time I did that, it was just a crap shot what kind of mink I was going to get. And so I said, you know what? I need to start putting the odds in my favor and selecting for certain traits. So I went to a mink farm and I went through 700 males and 700 females and filtered out the most aggressive, confident mink on the farm that were available for me to buy. 700 males, 700 females, picked out the best 20 of each, roughly. I don't remember the exact numbers other than the 700 part. I don't remember how many I took home, but it was roughly 20 of each gender. And I took them home and then I run them through tests at home. and picked out the very, very best and narrowed it down to the top 4 males, top 4 females. So basically I went from 700 to 20, let's say. Like I said, I don't remember if it was exactly 20, but from 700 down to 20, from 20 down to 4. And then I bred those 4 males, 4 females together. And then every litter I would go through and say, okay, you're the very best baby or 2 babies out of the litter. We're going to keep you. We're going to sell the rest. You're the best 1 or 2 out of this litter. We're going to keep you. We're going to sell the rest. And over time, I've created a line of hunting mink that are the most, and I don't really focus on tameness. That's like a perk. Like, oh, cool, you're not as mean, but I don't really care. I want a confident, aggressive, athletic hunting machine. Whether you bite me or not is a plus. And I will give it as a plus. It's like, man, this mink hunts really good, really aggressive predator, and he doesn't bite me. Hey, I like that one better than the ones who's equally as aggressive and athletic and all that, but he does bite me. So I'm going to pick this one. And most of the time, I just avoid the teeth. I wear gloves. I teach them to go in the trap rather than handling them. I just put a little cage on the ground, whistle, they go in the cage. It's usually a live trap and it'll shut on its own. Or if it's like a carry kennel, then I'll shut the door myself. I don't ever have to handle them. They don't have to be nice. I don't care if they're nice. I want them to have high food drive so I can train them. I want them to have prey drive so I can hunt with them. I want to be athletic so they can catch stuff. I want to be healthy, obviously. If they're nice, that's just a plus. And I really don't search for it. I literally have bred mink that are so aggressive that I have holes in my pants where they jumped up and bit my butt because they realized my boots, they knew my boots went up to my knee. Can't bite him there, just bite boot. Okay, let's jump higher and grab him on the butt. Ah, son of a gun, They grab the sheep and hang him by the sheep's ear, sheep's running around the yard. I have a milk sheep, a dairy sheep that cuts my lawn. Like they're confident, aggressive suckers. But that's what I want. I want them to get down that hole, battle those rats, not be shy about it. Because the frank reality is not all mink are that confident and aggressive. We think of them all, like I said, the stereotypical mink kills everything. They're afraid of nothing. That's not true. Most of them have some degree of self-preservation, and it's usually too much. And they get bit once or twice by a rat, and they start thinking, I don't know if I like hunting rats. Maybe I should be more careful, or maybe not hunt them at all. I'm going to go find rabbits. Let's go fishing. They'll stop going after those prey. Just like a ferret. I mean, ferreters, if they've done rats before, they run into that problem all the time. Well, the ones who quit, maybe they start out good and then they quit. I'm not going to breed them. So I go through and I test them hard. Hey, what do you do when you get bit? Do you get scared or do you get mad? And eventually I figure out which ones are the good ones, and I keep the very best of every litter and breed them on to the next generation. Now the rest, it's hard to find homes for mink because they're not like a ferret. They're a complicated, difficult animal to work with. And so I just have to find those. And luckily, because of my platform, I have lots of people asking. Most of the people, I turn them down and say, sorry. Like I have to go through a lot of people before I find someone that I trust enough to give a mink. People all the time reaching out to me, oh, that'd be a great idea. And I'm going to yeah. And it's like, okay, well, what research have you done? Well, none. Okay. Here's a book. I've got a 242-page book. Read this book. Oh, okay, they disappear. They're not going to read a book, But if you get someone who's like, okay, I'll read the book. And then they okay, well, what did you learn in the book? Oh, well, this and that and the other. And okay, great. Well, what'd you learn in the book? I don't know. Well, okay, well, you're not getting a mink, So I'll filter out a lot of people before I finally find someone that I'm like, you know what? You sound dedicated. You've been bugging me. I didn't bug you. I don't call you, hey, you ready to buy a mink? No. You got to keep bugging me. Hey, I want a mink. Hey, I want a mink. Hey, I want a mink. If you don't do that, you're not going to get a mink from me. If you don't read my book, you're not going to get a mink from me. If you don't get a proper housing, you're not going to get a mink from me. If you don't prove to be that you know something about the topic when I start asking you questions, you're not going to get a mink from me. And eventually it filters down to a few select people, and those extra mink go to the person they fit best. If someone's like, I want to go fishing with a mink, or I want to hunt bunnies with a mink, they're going to get the softest mink in that litter, who did not show any desire to hunt muskrats or rats. The guy who wants to hunt rats like me, he's going to get the most aggressive one that I didn't keep, right? The one who's the best that I didn't keep, because obviously the very best are going for me.
Do you know
And
what it
that's
is, Joseph?
where my extras go.
This is exactly the same. What you are describing there is exactly what I went through when I was a young lad with dogs. Like, incredibly so. It is everything, whether it was terriers or lurchers. This is pre-ban, folks. I'm not talking about now because we're not allowed to hunt like that anymore. This is pre-ban, so please don't jump on it. But it's exactly what you were saying. You know, the amount of people would say, "Oh, I've got a dog that kills foxes," and you'd be like, "All right," and you found out they killed 2 in like 3 years. And you're like, there's a big difference between that and a dog that kills foxes. You know, that at 50 is still good. We're not allowed to do it anymore, and rightly so, and I don't condone it. But yeah, and that was exactly how dogs got given away. They were never sold. It was, is he the right person? Is he going to look after it? Does he know what he's getting? Because they're a fucking nightmare if they don't. You know, you've got to be. It takes a very special breed of person to take something on like that, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I've learned on the dog subject, I've gotten to where I don't, unless I really personally know the guy, I will take everything he says with a grain of salt. He said, "Oh yeah, man, this dog kills coons and he'll find coons and it's great." That's awesome. I'm interested in seeing the dog. Not interested in getting the dog yet, but I am interested in seeing it because you're saying all the right stuff. Let me drive out, fly out, whatever I got to do. Let's see the dog do what you say they're doing. Because a lot of times what they say doesn't match what they do. And it's not necessarily always a case of dishonesty. Sometimes it's blatant dishonesty, but other times it's just they have a very different view as you. For them, killing a raccoon is getting a little half-grown baby coon that was really easy. And, "Oh, look, he killed it." I'm like, yeah, but my neighbor's dog could have done that too. Let's see him on a big boar. Oh, wow. Well, we don't go after those around here. Okay, well then that's not the dog I want. Thanks, buddy. It's nice to meet you. You have a beautiful place. Keep in touch, you know. You know.
I'll call you, don't call me.
Yeah. So I mean that's, and I've fallen into so many traps. Oh, that dog will blow through coons. That's amazing. Oh, blah blah blah. And I get out there and it's like, dude, this dog could barely kill a kid. Like, what are you talking about, man? And like I said, some cases it's blatant dishonesty, but in many cases it's an honest mistake on their part. Like you said, they've been hunting twice. It worked those 2 times. It's a great dog. Every time I've taken it out, he's found and caught a coon. All 3 times. And it's like, that's not, I don't go out 3 times, you know, like I go out 3 times a week, not a year or a lifetime, you know. So
go on, you've got to tell us the story of Washugano, because that would have been around about 2008 2009 that was put up, and I can remember watching that.
That'd have been much later. That'd have been like like 13 or something, 2013 maybe. I'd have to look up the date, but
I can remember
because I was married.
That was the best story ever.
I was married, so let's figure out when I was married. Anyway, it was like 2014 maybe, but anyway, I'd have to figure out the dates, but here, let me see. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Date doesn't matter. So like I was describing, I'd run into, you know, having, this was before my breeding project, obviously, but it was like kind of the beginnings of my breeding project. Before I went through the official 700 to get down to the, you know, the 20 or whatever. Before that, this is like a year, maybe 2 years. No, because it would have been 2 years before that. I was going to, now let me think. Was I trying to get a hunter or a breeder? I might have been trying to make a litter with him. I know I did want to make a litter with him, but I don't know if that was the goal or if it was a side goal, like as well as getting a good hunt. Anyway, it doesn't really matter what my goal was. I basically showed up at the farm looking for the baddest son of a gun I could find. And I went through and tested all of his young mink. I was like, I don't need to mess with your adults. Let me look at all your young mink. And I went through and I tested them all, and I had like a rabbit fur, and I'd be like, okay, do you attack the fur through the cage? If you do, good. Okay, let's take you to a new place. We had these big pens set up, and we take him out of his cage and put him in this weird place. And a lot of animals, dogs, doesn't matter the animal, you know, a dog barking through the fence, he's all tough. Okay, well, let's take that dog and put him in the park. All of a sudden he's like, oh, I don't know if I want to bite anyone, you know. But in his fence, he's the toughest dog alive, right? Mink, same thing. In their cage, they've never been out of, they'll go after the pelt like with a vengeance. You put them in a new cage, and all of a sudden they're looking, oh, how do I get out of here? They're not so tough anymore. And so we basically filtered them out that way. I got them narrowed down to my favorite couple mink, and I was like, I'm ready to go. I found the most aggressive, confident mink here. They really weren't as aggressive and confident as I was really hoping for, but they're better than the other ones. We're ready to go. And the farmer's like, you ought to come see this one mink just for fun. Like, I know you said you wanted the young ones, so I never showed you him this whole 8 hours or whatever. We've been there 5 hours. But here, come over and look at this mink. He's kind of cool. And I come over there and he starts telling me a little bit about him. Yeah, he's pretty aggressive, man. And I think you'd like to at least see him. And, oh, yeah, let me see him. And I get over there, and there's this bright red mink. I'd never seen one this color in my whole life. And I've seen all kinds of colors. But this sucker was like a ginger mink. Like the reddest red-haired kid you've ever seen. Picture his hair. And that's how red this mink was. And I'm like, wow, that's a cool colored mink. He's like, yeah. And he's like, check this out. And he pops the cage open. This thing just comes out, just grabs his glove, and you lift your glove up, and he's just hanging from it, shaking. And it's like, holy cow, man, that mink's intense. And I couldn't get him off the glove. I mean, I could have forced him off. I could have, done things, but like getting him to just let go on his own, I couldn't get him off the glove, holding him. A lot of times a mink latches on and you grab its body and it'll let go and like re-grip or something. He just hung on like you weren't even touching him. And I'm like, dude, I can't get him off. So I put the glove, let the glove go and let it go down in the cage. And he's got the glove and he's still fighting it in the cage. And I'm like, well, geez, how are we going to get that glove back? And I was like, okay, well, let's see if we could slip it back. And then he latched onto the next glove and we couldn't get the gloves. And finally I was like, okay, well, dude, you didn't tell me you had this mink. He's like, well, you said you only wanted yearlings. He's 2. And I'm like, well, it wasn't really yearlings. I should say they were like 6 to 9 months old, something like that. So they were coming up on a year, and he would have been, coming up on 2 or 3. And he's like, well, you didn't tell me you wanted one. And I'm like, well, dude, I like this mink. Let's go test him. So we took him over to the cages and just hung him. And like the whole way there, he's just hanging on the glove, got him to the test cages. He didn't care he was in the test cage. He was fighting just as much, just aggressive. I'm like, dude, why did you waste my time? You should have showed me him first. He's like, well, you said you only wanted young ones. I'm like, I'm an idiot. Don't listen to me next time. So I get him off the glove somehow and get him in a cage and take him home. Man, this sucker was a monster. I got him home, and that silly, multi-layer coats and pants and gloves that I joked about in my first mink? You needed it with this mink. He'd hit you. He'd come after you. Like, he wasn't like waiting for you to come bother him and then he'd bite you. No, he'd come after you. I put him on a harness. It was easy. You give him your finger, he latches on, obviously with a glove on, latches on. You have the harness. I invented my own harness that's a bunch of strings. And he's latching on, and you just slide it over his body. Got the harness on, and away we go. And literally the whole walk was me holding him at arm's length while he tries to get me. And I'm just holding him at arm's length. And we just went for a walk. The whole time he's trying to attack me. And I'm like, holy crap, this thing is just nuts. I figured when I got him out on a string, he'd try and run away or pay attention to something else. The whole time, arm's length. And I just run ahead of him. And him, like, he looks like a freaking like Mallow on the end of the rope trying to get the guy in the suit, just bonkers. Well, eventually I taught him, hey, look, let's go catch some other things. I'm not that fun to catch. Let's go catch a rabbit. Let's go catch a rat. Let's go catch a muskrat. And eventually I got his focus off of me onto actual prey. And as soon as he started killing actual prey, he was like, that's a lot more fun than grabbing you. You're not that fun anymore. Boom. He was done. No more aggression. It was all focused now on hunting. Oh, I like killing these rabbits. I like killing these rats. This is so much more fun. I don't need to bite you. You're boring. Literally could pick him up with my hands. He had no fear of me. He thought of me as prey. Once I wasn't prey anymore, what's up, bud? Let's go kill some stuff. Easiest mink I've ever tamed. Pick him up barehanded, throw a harness on him. Let's go, bud. Okay, let's go kill some stuff. Like, once I was his like mode of transportation to kill stuff, no reason to bite me. And literally, I took the glove off in less than a week. and I was holding him barehanded. Never tagged me once. Never.
That sounds like
because I
a
wasn't
very.
prey anymore. I was just the cool guy who took him to kill stuff. And he was really easy to train him to come back, and he'd come back, and we'd take him out rabbit hunting. He was hell on dogs, though. We couldn't have a dog around because he'd try and go after the dogs. He still saw them as prey. But I wasn't prey anymore, so I was his friend. And no need for gloves anymore.
This is the very dictionary definition of the fact that there are certain behavioral traits that do span all species, and people sit there and they say, oh, the only animals on earth that are, assholes and psychopaths are human beings. And I'm pretty certain this mink disproves that particular myth. I mean, this animal sounds like a psychopath, like the dictionary definition of an axe-wielding murderer.
See, this is the difference. Hang on a second. This is the difference between someone who's never had like working killing dogs and someone who hasn't. Because you hear axe-wielding murderer, what I hear is something that is absolutely just needed pointing in the right direction. That's all it needed. Do you know what I mean? Like,
and as soon as he was pointed in the right direction, he never looked back.
Yeah.
No, like I said, I don't think it was a week, and I had the gloves off, and he had no thought of biting me. It might have even been less time than that. In fact, I probably wore the gloves longer than I needed because I was just making sure he didn't change his mind. He was.
Hang on a second. Do us a favor though. Tell him where the name comes from, because I watched this and that was the moment where I just started consuming your content because I thought it was fucking brilliant.
So his name is Washushe, which it's so when I was describing my mission, you remember earlier I was telling about being a missionary. For a portion of my mission, for almost 6 months, I was on a Native American Indian reservation for the Omaha tribe. And while I was there, I didn't need to because they all spoke English, but I liked learning their language. In fact, most of them, all of them, I should say, spoke Omaha as a second language if they knew it at all. Most people didn't. Most people on the res know about as much Omaha. Well, that's a bad example because you guys aren't from America, but they just knew like words and phrases. It was actually uncommon to find someone who was fluent. And usually they learned it as a second language. They went, oh, I'm going to learn Omaha in school. So there was no need to know it, but I thought it was cool and interesting. So I would learn like words and phrases, like how do you say this? How do you say that? How do you say this? How do you say that? And it was not conversational at all. It was just, hey, I can say the word for, Tonga. That means big. Ompa means, anyway, I could just say words. So anyway, I learned there a phrase, washushe, from an old man that was telling us a story. And he's like, washushe is, it's when you're not just brave, you're beyond brave. And he's like, let me tell you a story. It'd be like we're back in the day when it's Omaha versus the Sioux. Those are two different Native American tribes. So Omaha versus the Sioux. And you're out there all by yourself and you're riding up over a ridge and you look down the ridge and you see half a dozen Sioux warriors mounted on ponies. If you're Washushe, if you're a normal man, you turn around and go back. If you're Washushe, you grab your tomahawk and you give a war rope and you go straight down the hill and you attack those. Doesn't matter that there's 6 of them. They're your enemy. You're going to get them. That is Washushe. So that's how he described the word to me. And I'm like, I got to remember that. I pull out my notebook and I write it down. Washushe. This is how you pronounce it. And this is how you spell it. And I'm like, I'm going to use that someday. Someday I will have an animal that's deserving of that name. And I kept that. And that was 2006 or 5. Somewhere around there. And I saved that name clear till what is it? It was 2014. When 2014 rolled around, I'm like, Washushe. And I pulled out, actually I had it memorized at that point. I didn't have to pull out a notebook. I had to pull out the notebook to remember how to write it, And but I knew how to pronounce it because I'd had that name rolling around in my head. Someday I'll run into a Washushe. Someday I'll run into a Washushe. And when I saw that little ginger mink just ready to kill everything, I was like, you, sir, are Washushe, and that's where he got his name.
This is like every little boy's dream who goes hunting, isn't it? It's like that's what you're basically living. Every little boy who likes ferrets and snares and hunting and fishing and all that, you're still living their dream, aren't you?
Yeah, I really am.
Yeah,
It's a blast.
fucking brilliant,
It's
brilliant.
a blast.
I'm surprised Sean hasn't asked yet, and I really am, as to how easy it is to get a mink shipped across to the north of England. Like, genuinely.
Mate, I fucking well, I didn't want to say this out loud because I've got a horrible feeling I know what's going to happen. But we do catch them every now and again. We have the River Tees. We've had a couple of jobs where they'd made someone's river boat their home, and if anyone's never dealt with mink that aren't cleaned up after, and they've been living on a riverboat for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month on their own, you know, it's nearly a fucking insurance write-off because they stink, don't they? Stink,
Yeah.
stink.
So they only really stink if you scare them or if you let their waste build up. They actually don't have a body odor. Like ferrets have a constant body odor. You could literally buy special shampoo.
Yeah.
I've had pet ferrets. You could buy special shampoo and wash them every day, and they still have that and have their musk glands removed. They're fixed, neutered, musk glands removed. Everyone that's physically possible. They take them out. You wash them with special ferret soap every day, and they have that musky odor. Mink don't have a body odor.
Yeah.
If I have a wife who, when she was pregnant, if I opened a jar of peanut butter in the other room, she starts gagging. We had a ferret in the other, or mink, excuse me, not a ferret. We had a mink in the other room. No issue. But I couldn't open a bag of fresh bread without her gagging, or a jar of peanut butter without her gagging in the other room. I'm not even saying she's like right there smelling it. She's in the other room. Oh, put a zip tie on that bread. Bread? I didn't even know bread had a smell. But we had a pet mink living in the apartment in a cage. I just made sure its litter box was clean. Obviously, if I let that go, anything stinks, right? And it does have a dirtier. I would say their urine and their droppings do have a stronger scent than some animals. It's not like it has no scent. No, it does. But if you keep it in like a kitty litter that like absorbs the smell, and you keep it, cleaned on a regular basis, and you're not scaring the mink, you scare the mink, yeah, the whole house is going to reek. But if you don't scare the mink, keep the litter box clean, you literally no smell. The minute the dirt box starts getting dirty, you start to smell a little bit. The minute you scare them, the neighbors know, But the thing is, when you tame a mink down, or better yet, if you raise one from a baby, you could literally go months without making them musk. Even some individuals, maybe years. And when they do musk, generally it's a light musk because they're not terrified. It's not like a mink you just caught in a trap and he emptied his glands.
See, that's all I've ever dealt with. We've trapped a lot of them. I used to trap them on the River Tyne when I was a kid. We've trapped them on the Tees. We've trapped them on ponds for fishermen where they were just eating everything. When they were fishing on the fishing lakes, we went to one and there was a huge problem with them. We're walking down the fishing lakes and there was people on every peg. This peg's got 48. This pond has 48 pegs on, 13 meters between each pegs. So you can imagine how big it was. And we're driving along and you just seen this mallard just go under the water.
Yeah.
Popped up on the other side, getting its head chewed off by a mink, and he was like, they're eating everything, like everything. We caught loads of them up there and got that cleared. So, but like you say, we're pulling them out of traps, and that drop is horrendous, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's because they're terrified. They're emptying those scent glands to the max. And when that happens, whether they're tame or wild, like you step on his tail really bad or something, yeah, that reeks, and it'll reek for a while. But a normal light, like, oh, you startled me, it's gone. It's like someone passed gas. It's gone in minutes. If it's a little bit more, it's going to be a couple hours. If they just emptied those glands and it happened to get into some porous substance, you'll smell it for days. But that is not a normal circumstance for a tamed, trained individual. And I do have to say, though, there is a range. There are individuals that kind of seem to be on a hair trigger. They will kind of more easily go off. And usually you could tell it's their personality, but it's not always. Sometimes they're nervous, but they're not musking. Sometimes they're confident, but they easily musk. So it's not always directly correlated with temperament, but definitely on average, the more nervous ones are going to go off more easily. The more confident ones are going to go off less easily. But generally speaking, I mean, I could go for months without smelling it, months. And I have dozens of mink in my backyard. Well, not dozens. That's not true. I have over a dozen mink in my backyard, and I'm handling them every day. And I could go months without smelling it once. But when we go to vaccinate, you could tell my neighbors know. They know it was vaccination day.
I was literally about to say the same thing that Hugh was then. I think we've all got a friend who's exactly like that, though, isn't it? Hair trigger, primed to go off at any second, smells a bit funky. And guys, if I've just described someone that you don't, if you don't see the weirdo on the bus, I hate to tell you, probably you. So there we go. Oh, I think.
We've told you too much, but I've got to ask one more thing as well, because we haven't covered it ever so slightly. But dogs, because you're running pit bulls with your minks, aren't you?
Yep.
Yeah. But
yeah,
they're not the proper pit bulls, aren't they? Like, for what people don't know, if people see a picture of them, they'd think it was like some sort of crossbred staffy, but they are, because people have this vision of pit bulls being these big, scary, horrible dogs. But like, I'll let you take it from there, because you've got to remember, in this country they're illegal.
Yeah.
So what we think they are and what they are often two separate things, aren't they?
Well, even here they're legal, and there's so many dogs that people call pit bulls that are not. So I would say easily where I live. Now, you go in the South where dog fighting's more common, you're going to run into a lot more real pit bulls. But here in the North, 90+% of the dogs, people are like, oh, I've got a pit bull. Oh, really? Let's do a DNA test. Oh, it's a Labrador cross with a boxer. Oh, you got a pit bull. Let's do a DNA test. It's a pure bull mastiff. Oh, I got a pit bull. Let's do a DNA test. It's a pure Dogo Argentino. Oh, I got a pit bull. Oh, let's do a DNA test. Oh, it's half pit bull, half something else. So 90+% of the dogs, I would say more than half, don't even have pit bull blood. Like none, zero. Yeah. The other half of the non-pit bulls have pit bull blood, but it's like some percentage, 50%, 10%, whatever. And they have what's become really popular, and they finally gave it their own name. They have what's called an American bully. But for 20 years, it was a pit bull. Oh, it's a pit bull. It's a pit bull. But it wasn't. They took pit bulls and they crossed them with a bunch of other stuff, mastiffs and English bulldogs and other junk, just to get size or shape or whatever they're looking for. And it's got a percentage of pit bull in it. It could be 75%. It could be 10%. It's got some pit bull in it. But they, for years, marketed them as triple XL pit bulls or big pit bulls or bully pit bulls or whatever. Eventually, they've recently started to admit, okay, yeah, they're not pit bulls. But they went so far as to, do you guys know the term hanging papers? Okay, it's where you register a dog and you say, this is the mom and dad, but it's not really. It's the dog.
Yeah, Wait, it happens a lot in gun dogs.
Yeah.
What happens in this country in gun dogs is they'll breed a litter out of a dog and a bitch, which is a really, really good dog and a bitch, but they're not papered. And they'll think that's fucking brilliant, that, and they'll want to get papers for it. So they'll just take a papers off a papered dog and give it to it. So they're actually adding shit papers. They're adding papers from a shit dog that was no good to a dog that is good to bring that blood back in. So that's, yeah, that it happens a lot in gun dogs, that.
So they would do that with these bullies. They wanted a big, massive pit bull. So they weren't patient enough to just do, selective breeding. So they'd cross it with some mastiff, and then they'd hang the papers and be like, yeah, this is the mom and dad. They're both pure. See, they're registered pit bulls. So look, this is a pure registered pit bull. It was like half or less, So these bully guys have totally ruined it for anyone who says we got a pit bull, because you show up with a totally normal, purebred pit bull, and everyone's like, what has he got in it? What do you mean what he's got in it? Well, that's not a pure pit bull. Pure pit bulls are like this. No, they're not. My Bindi is a very average female. She's 36 pounds, fit, 37 if she's a little chubby. Totally, completely normal build, shape, and color. And they're like, they don't come in that color. What do you mean they don't come in that color? That's one of the most common colors. So anyway, I have So sorry, that was a long tangent. Basically, it happens here, is what I'm saying. People here don't know what a pit bull is most of the time. So dog fighting is almost completely eradicated from your country. It's completely illegal in my country, but not even remotely eradicated. There's probably more dog fighters in my country than there are terrier guys going to ground. That's just the reality of it. It's completely illegal, but there's plenty of guys still doing it and doing it to a very high level. Most of them will take their illegal activities just across the border. They'll go over to Mexico, do the illegal deed, and then come back here. And they live here, breed here, do all their business here. Then they go over there to do competitions. So they have the legitimate, real deal, if you know where to look for it, actual pit bull. Not in name, not in registry, in actual genetics. And people are all like, oh, those dogs must be horrible and out of control and vicious. And everyone thinks that because it's a fighting dog, it must be just this horrible demon. Well, the reality is those dogs, to do what they do, whether you hate it or love it or admire it from afar, whatever your take is on it, it creates a very, very different animal than what people envision when they think of a pit bull. You get a very athletic, a very intelligent, and a very devoted animal. They're very devoted to their master, to the point where these people with ill intentions will utilize that and put these dogs in competitions that risk the dog's life on a regular basis. But the reason that dog's willing to give up his life for his master is because that is the kind of dog he is. And everyone loves to think that their Labrador or German Shepherd or Malinois or whatever will give up their life for him. No, they won't. The minute crap hits the fan, they're gone. Even those well-trained police dogs, you poke that dog in the eye with your finger, most of them will come off your arm and go run away and hide behind their master. Kill him first, don't hurt me. And people think, oh, their dogs are so tough because they bark or because they bite a guy in a suit while he rattles a stick, dude. The minute crap gets real, they're going to hide behind you and say, please kill him first. Pit bulls are one of the only dogs, because they're tested for it, that will say, what do you want me to do, master? Okay, I'm going to do it. And my life doesn't matter. And so you've got a very different and unique animal that if you channel that in a healthy direction rather than these illegal activities, you can have an amazing animal to work with. And a lot of people assume, okay, well, they're bred for fighting. They must be just a nightmare to break to fighting, to keep them from fighting with dogs. Believe it or not, I have a harder time with my terriers. Every terrier I've ever owned at one point has flipped a switch and gone after another dog and done it with real intent. They weren't just scrapping. They weren't just, leave my food alone. They're like, I'm going to kill you. Every terrier I've ever owned has done that at one point. I have yet to have an accident with a pit bull. And like I said, these are real, actual pit bulls. They're not papered or they're actual. They have ancestors who've done illegal activities. And yet I tell them, hey, dogs are off limits. Leave that dog alone. Leave that sheep alone. Leave that chicken alone. Leave that mink alone. Don't chase deer. Deer are off limits. Skunks, turn around, go the other way. Rats, kill them all day long. Raccoons, kill them all day long. Beavers, nope. Leave that beaver alone. I don't want your leg getting chopped off. You leave that beaver alone. And they will literally, there's a beaver in the water. It won't even look at it. And then he's off limits. Oh, there's a muskrat in the water. Dive in, grab it, dive under the water, come up and kill it. They'll go down in a hole. Oh, there's a skunk. Come back out. I'm not allowed to go in there, man. There's a skunk.
This is what people don't say though. Those proper dogs. When you say it'll dive under the water to get it, like that's incomprehensible to some people. Them proper dogs. That is every day, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, I ate a catfish that was about this big. It fed my entire family for 3 meals that my dog caught. She dove under the water, grabbed it, came up, and brought it to me.
I love shit like that. It's just a young boy's dream, isn't it? This is everything I wanted to do when I was a little kid. You know, I kill a catfish with a dog. It's fucking brilliant.
Yeah, they're cool dogs. I mean, they have their limitations. Their short coat is super annoying. I wish they had a warm coat. You know, there's dumb and annoying things about them. They're not like the have all be all. And if you're not smart, you're going to have an accident. They're not going to hurt you. They're not going to hurt your kid. That's a weird individual that does that. I shouldn't say it's impossible. You could get a screwy dog, right? But generally speaking, you're safe. Your kids are safe. Your neighbors are safe. But if you don't do everything right, your neighbor's dog is not safe.
Yeah.
I do everything right. I haven't had a problem. I've literally had my pit bulls latched onto by another dog. And they look at me and say, dude, get him off. I'm not doing it. And they get cowardly, like, dude, don't get mad at me. I'm not doing it. Pull him off my leg. And I'll go over and pull him off his leg. I'm sorry. I didn't start it. And they're apologizing to me because the other dog attacked them.
Yeah.
And do that to a terrier. What's that terrier going to do? You son of a... And they're both going at it like crazy. Show me a terrier that's a tough terrier, that's gritty, that will go in and fight another animal, get all chewed up and want more. I'm not saying some wimpy little terrier that's scared. He's a tough fighting dog when it comes to hunting. And then have another dog attached to him, latched onto his ear, and he looks at you and says, can you pull him off? This is quite uncomfortable. I have every pit bull I've ever owned has been attacked by another dog, and they look at me. Now, granted, if I was not there and they were alone and that dog kept attacking them, I'm sure they'd have turned around and killed it. I'm not naive enough to say they'll do that indefinitely. But there, while I'm in person, they look at me and say, dude, come get him off. This is not cool. He's biting my leg. He's biting my ear. He's biting my whatever. And I come over, get that other dog off and say, hey, you quit that. And he's like, okay, thanks. Let's go. Let's keep working, boss. You know, what are we catching next?
Yeah. Find out the rats. Right. Go on, Al. So sorry, mate. I've loved it.
We'll find some raccoons. And I'm sure there's probably dogs who will never be that way. I'm also not trying to say every dog and but if you as a handler do everything right, I've had way more grief with my terriers fighting, way more. And my terriers don't fight. You see the videos, they're working with strange dogs. They're focused. They're good dogs, but they're still a terrier. Eventually, crap's going to hit the fan and they're going to scrap it out and you got to pull them apart, you know. But I have yet to have that with two game bred pit bulls working side by side with a bunch of little annoying terriers or whatever, lurchers or, you know. I had a bulldog. This dog I got as a 19-month-old right off of a guy's yard. 19 months old, put a couple months into him, got him under control. He was grabbed by a Mal lurcher, and they were on a coon together, and the lurcher got jealous, let go of the coon, grabbed that bulldog, had him by the scruff of shaking him, and he was just driving deeper into the coon. I'll get that coon. Oh, he's gonna get that coon. I know I can't fight this dog, but I can get that coon. Didn't even look his direction. And that lurcher was 4 times his size. It was a 25-pound. Well, no, at that point he was more like 28 pounds, 29-pound pit bull and a flipping whatever he was, 70-pound lurcher. So I mean, huge difference, shaking him around, and he's just driving in deeper on that coon, you know.
Yeah.
And I got the dog as a 19-month-old. It wasn't like I got him, raised him from 9 weeks, and he knew me his whole life, and I ingrained it into his head. He was still a new dog. I'd only had him for a few months. Got him as an adult, but he knew sheep off limits, dogs off limits, raccoons full speed ahead. You know.
So I've got 2 questions before we hit our closing 3. Number 1, you mentioned mentorship before. Do you mentor other pest managers out there? Do you run mentorship, or is this all you? I mean, because it sounds like you've got a lot to give. So do you offer mentorship? Do you take on young pest managers, old pest managers, show them how it's done so they can do it properly?
I did it a lot more in the beginning, but most people just get frustrated with it and quit. So I don't really make much effort to do it now. I have some. Yeah, there's a lady on the East Coast. Her name's Kim. She's great. She was kind of mentored under me. She doesn't do it with the mink. She does it with dogs. And she's imported some of your guys' working ferrets, and she's trying to get them to work. She says I mentor her. I don't know that I would call it that strong of a thing, but I guess I give her good advice because she says I'm her mentor. But right now I don't have anybody, and every now and then someone will come along. It's usually a youth, a young guy in the neighborhood, and they'll want to try it. And I'll get him a mink and help him out. And then sometimes it's some adult clear across the country and I'm helping them out. But I don't
About an adult,
I
probably
don't make an
clear
effort
across-
to do it.
Yeah, what about an adult clear across the pond?
Oh yeah.
Looks a little bit like Sean. I mean, because let's be fair, I'm genuinely surprised that Sean hasn't asked you to adopt him yet. I mean, I kind of felt like it's been ruined
listen,
all.
I've got to, no, I promise you, my days of dogs and things like that are well behind us. I've done enough. I've got the business. I've got stuff on. I've got a young lad here who works with us who has some very good ferrets. Does a lot of that sort of stuff. He's really into that, and I'm sure he'll probably send you a message at some point or what have you. And I know that at some point someone's going to say to me, "Don't tell anyone," but I've got myself a mink in a trap. In fact, I'm not going to say who it is, but I know someone who caught a mink, a bitch, and he said the same. What he told me, I wasn't sure whether he was telling us the truth, but after tonight, I think he's probably right. He said he got it to a point in no time at all where it was taking fish through the bars of the cage, and he said she was nice and she was pleasant and she was polite, and then I think she got out. Oh, I'm sure she got out. I think that was the story, and he hasn't done it again. He was thinking about doing it again, but it never happened. But I'm sure I can't believe after this episode that someone in this country who's trapping mink isn't going to give it a go. They've got to give it a go, haven't they? Like, they've got to.
Yeah.
If I had the time, I would give it a go, but I don't.
Yeah, I know a couple guys. Obviously, they have to keep their heads down, so we can't really talk about it. But yeah, there's a few people.
Yeah, they've got to, haven't they? There's got to be people giving it a go, hasn't there?
It really does.
Yeah.
So
It's hard to
here
be
we go.
successful. It's easy enough to get one tame and keep one as a pet, but actually getting out and actually hunting and fishing with one is it's a whole new level of complexity. So a lot of people struggle with that part of it, but there's quite a few people on your side of the pond that have gotten as far as the tame, catch a few things here and there. So yeah.
I think that, as you say, the worry is, isn't it, that if you have one and you do a bit with it, you get spotted, then it's going to cause you a whole load of fucking aggro in it. People come to take it off you, and do you have a net license and all that shit for, they're running all over every fucking river in the country now, but you definitely, so I won't be doing it.
Yeah.
Well, in which case, I mean, we've gone well over our prescribed time, and there are people still listening, still commenting, still, getting involved. So thank you ever so much, Joseph. It's been really, really excellent to have you on. And you may have seen our podcast before. You may very well have not. But at the end of every episode, we ask our guest star 3 questions, the same 3 questions.
Give me 1 second. Give me 1 second. I gotta plug this laptop in.
Go on, Sean. While we're waiting for this, you have been so starstruck tonight. I was.
No, it's not. It's not. It's not. When I was a police officer, I was always told that a good interviewer is a good listener, and I could listen to this all night. Like, sometimes when we have guests, we have to lead them through it and drag it out. But you've just been phenomenal. You've known the bits to hit and when not to hit. That's not being taught. That's just a natural presentation. So fucking thank you very much. It just brings me back to my childhood. That's what it does. It's been fantastic. I've loved it.
Well, we've clearly enjoyed our time on the podcast, but the big question is, Joseph, the Minkman, have you enjoyed our podcast tonight? Have you enjoyed chatting to us?
I do. I if you can't tell, if I haven't hidden it too well with my personality, I love talking about mink and telling stories. And my grandpa was a big storyteller. He was a cowboy, and he'd tell the wildest stories. And man, I wish I would have got him. It was before the day of much digital technology. I wish I'd have got videos of him telling his wild stories of getting bucked off of a horse and drugged through the desert and all the crazy things that he did. So I kind of got that from him, because I grew up listening to his wild cowboy stories. So yeah, I thoroughly enjoy the opportunity. I hope I didn't. I am really blunt. If you can't tell, I have a no filter. So anyone who was offended by something I said, Sorry, that's just how I am. I have almost no filter, and I'll say things that'll get myself in trouble all the time. This is actually why I don't have a podcast. I was like, man, if I did this on a regular basis, I'd get in some kind of legal trouble or something. So the only podcast I've done so far is someone else's because I'm scared to do it on a regular basis. So.
Oh, no, I think you'd be brilliant. Well, next question. Give us a shameless plug if you wanted to plug a product or a service for yourself. You know, you've given up 2 hours of your time. This is your chance to do it. Give us a shameless plug.
Okay, so I would say I saw someone mention, or maybe it was a couple people mentioned about a book. I've written a book on mink. It is a little bit old. I wrote it clear back, I don't know, 8 years ago. So really, I've updated a lot of my methods as far as training a mink and such, but it's probably the most, or not probably, it's definitely without a doubt the most comprehensive book on how to handle, train, and care for a mink. There is some stuff in there I wish I could go back and change, and one of these days I'll get the time to do it. Probably by then I'll be an old man, but it's an awesome book. Like I said, 242 pages. Check that out. If you look in the description of my videos, anything I'm describing right now, you could find. So there's a web store where you could buy shirts, hats, books, things like that. My biggest recommendation or plug, I would say, is rather than books, hats, or anything like that, I would say check out my exclusive club. So on YouTube, I am very limited on what I could post. YouTube, I mean, I shouldn't say that. Let me take a step back. I'm really blessed that I could post as much as I do, because there are other content creators who really get hammered hard by YouTube and blocked for this or flagged for that. I'm really blessed. It could be a lot worse than it is, but I still am limited on what I can post on YouTube. As far as, like, you guys have probably heard me a dozen times mention hunting raccoons with dogs. If you notice, I have like one video on all of YouTube on that subject. Reason is just not, it's not acceptable according to YouTube. There are other guys who could get away with it for some reason, but when I post it, literally the video is taken down and I get a strike without me even making it public. I actually uploaded a video just to show a friend once, kept it on private, and they took it down. I was like, dude, I didn't even post it. It's just on the platform, and they take it off. So I've got raccoon hunting with dogs. I use terriers, pit bulls, lurchers, just depending on the situation. I've got, and raccoons, basically, so you understand it, they're like a badger that climbs trees. They're absolutely ferocious. In fact, I know guys who have imported proven badger dogs that quit on a raccoon. They are like a monkey crossed with a badger. They're just ferocious. But they're a big problem here. They cause a lot of problems. In my state, they're actually invasive. They're not supposed to be here. They're from other parts of the country, and they came here because of humans, and now they're wreaking havoc on our native wildlife, much like you guys described the mink in your country. The raccoons do in my specific state. So I do a lot of pest control for raccoons with my dogs, not with the mink, obviously. They would mess up a mink. They probably eat mink in the wild. In fact, they're just mean little suckers. But I do a lot of raccoon pest control. I also do some beaver pest control. I send a little terrier down a beaver den. When they come popping out, I spear them. I do not want the dogs to engage with the beaver. Beavers are big, dangerous, tree-chewing animals. I do not want my dog latching onto a beaver. So I've got a nice little baying terrier. I send them down. They give it a yappity yap and a nip here and there, and the beaver comes out, sticking with the spear, and we harvest the meat and the fur, and we get them out of situations where they're causing problems. None of that can be on YouTube. I also have some live catches. So there are places where beavers are overpopulated, and they're the ones I'm removing. There's other places where they're actually deficient. They don't have enough beavers. And so the state has some live capture programs that I've taken advantage of, where I'll catch a beaver alive. I'll go in there, wrestle the thing, try not to get my leg chopped off, and put it in a cage. None of that's on YouTube. I tried, and they blocked it. It's like, dude, I'm live catching a beaver. What's your problem? So there's some really cool stuff that if you want to see, it's on my exclusive club. At the bottom of every video, if it's even remotely recent video, you'll see, join my exclusive club. It does cost money. That's how I fund putting it up. These videos, a lot of people think of videos as free. Oh, I just stick them up there. No, man, I can take 2 or 3 days editing a video down to a digestible video, because I don't just go out and catch stuff every time. I've got 4 hours of not catching stuff and 15 minutes in the middle where it's exciting. So I've got to edit them down, make them interesting. So I'm not going to just do that for free. I have a lot of work to do in my life. I've got family. If I'm going to put in the time to edit a video, I want to get something out of it. And so if you pay for that subscription on my club, you could see all of the videos that I'm describing, plus a bunch of just little intricate details on training. Like when I described training with those rats, I don't post that on YouTube. People freak out when you release a rat and then the animal kills it. Oh my gosh, that's in, well, I'm sorry you don't like it, but it's a vital part in raising a mink or raising a pup. And I'll show that on my club where I almost never, or I'm very careful and edited when I do show it on YouTube, if I ever do. So there's a lot of really cool stuff that you're missing if all you are is watching my YouTube channel. Feel free to keep watching it. I will post everything I can on YouTube, but there's certain stuff that either I'm uncomfortable with or they're uncomfortable with that I don't post on YouTube, but it does goes to my exclusive club. And I'm putting 2, 3, sometimes even 4 videos a week on that club, whereas YouTube gets 1 a week, sometimes 2, but typically just 1 a week on YouTube. And like I said, 2, 3, sometimes 4 on my exclusive club. I also have write-ups where I'll answer questions in detail. And I also have pictures, like I can't really post a picture on YouTube. I'll put it up on my club. So it's almost become like a personal Facebook to me. You get the videos, you get my updates, you get pictures, you get long written descriptions on how to do this or why I do that or my opinions on this. So it's a pretty cool little club. It's just $10 a month. I don't know what that converts to on your guys' currency, but $10 a month, and it's month to month. You could watch it once and then quit if you don't like it. So sorry, that was a really long shout out. That's
the best plug we've ever had ever.
Well, you almost rivaled Jasmine's plug from last week, I have to say. So, I mean, that was excellent. Okay, which kind of brings me on to the last question, and kind of I kind of guess who you might say for this, or might have said for this, but who would you like to listen to if you were to sort of like swap places? If you were to be watching the screen now and seeing Sean and I interviewing someone, who would you like to see in the seat? Who would you like to see us interview next?
Actually, the one person I wanted to hear interview, another podcast just did. If you could, okay, so this is one I've already heard an interview for. There's a lady in the eastern United States by the name of Teddy Moritz. She's a falconer who hunts with these little teeny Canadian teckles, little dachshunds, and falconry. And so she goes out, these little teeny teckles, they go through the brush and go through holes and stuff and flush bunnies. And then her Harris hawk catches the bunnies. That lady is been falconer since, I think she said 1963, if I remember correctly, something around there. Pretty sure she said 63. And she is a wealth of knowledge. She is a very easy to talk to person. She's got endless stories and very outstanding human being in general. If you could get a hold of Teddy, I've got her contact if you want it. I don't know how easy it would be to get her on a video. It might have to be an audio only. I don't know, because she's obviously farther along in years if she started in 63. I don't know her age, to be honest, but anyway, what I'm getting at is I've never talked to her on any kind of social media, so I don't know how much computer access she even really has. But over the phone, you guys could get an amazing interview if you ever talk to Teddy Moritz. So let me know, and I could touch base with her before, and then
that'd be fantastic. And I'm pretty certain StreamYard does facilitate for people dialing in to have a bit of a chat, so that would be absolutely fantastic. But I think next week, who have we got on next week, Sean? Before everyone says good night.
So the 20th, I'm sure it was a review. The name escapes us. We missed him for the last one. Jim England. Yeah, I think it's Jim England on the 20th. I'm sure it's Jim England on the 20th. which should be a really good episode. But yeah, tonight's been phenomenal. We normally do an hour and 15 minutes, Joseph, and we've done 2 hours 25 with you. It's been that good. So it's been a joy. You know, it's been an absolute joy. Yeah, Jim England next week. So we've got Jim. Would you come back if we want you on again?
Oh, sure. Yeah, as you can tell, I could talk all day. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know what's going to happen now, though. Everyone's going to go watch your stuff, and it's going to start. So yeah. And I'll be watching more. I'll have to have a check out my club, because as cool as my YouTube videos are, there's a lot that I can't put up, and some of even the same videos are on that club. It's the identical video, but there's a part I had to cut out because some blood splurted or something. So check it out. What is it? Just pronounce it again. Washu what?
Washushe.
Washushe. Yeah. Love it. Absolutely love it. Right. I'm going to leave it at that. I think we're going to say ta-ra. If you hang around, Joseph, and then we'll see them all off and we'll catch you later. Are you doing the credits, Al?
I'm doing the credits. Thank you very much, guys, and to everyone listening. It's been a pleasure. We'll see you all next week. Bye.
God bless.
Thank you for listening to the Beauties and Beasties podcast.